Coming to you live from the same place we came last week, except this time with a flashy new director and a script that's probably not that great, but that's what happens when you reboot a podcast. This is the Movie Changeup podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joe Fricke. If you couldn't tell by the thumbnail or the title of this video, we are doing a ultimate bracket of reboots, remakes and revivals. If you don't know what a reboot's basically like a franchise that was going strong and fizzled out, and they decided to just kind of start over. Like Man of Steel was a reboot of the Superman franchise. You got your remakes, which is more just like there was a one-off. They made it once, and then a few years later, they decided, hey, that was popular. Let's remake it again. Similar to Adam Sandler's Longest Yard remake, which was, a remake of the Burt Reynolds version, or a revival, which is what we're calling a sequel that came out 10 years or more of the movie in the franchise that came before it. Like the prequels, The Phantom Menace was kind of a revival of the Star Wars franchise. It's in the same canon, in the same timeline, but it came out about 15 years later. So that's kind of the videos or the movies that we're covering today. Before we go any further and talk about today's movies, I'll kick it to Johnny, who I think might have been his idea to do this bracket, but the bracket was his idea in general, I think. I'm not really sure. I don't have a great memory. Johnny, what are your thoughts on this episode of reboots, remakes, and revivals?
We all kind of just came up with it together, I would say, to have, the idea for all three for sure. It was kind of a brainstorming committee to it. But I will say it's fitting because this is what we do. This is why we started our show. We do reboots and remakes and pitch new versions of movies that we've all seen or forgotten about, in our normal weeks. So I thought this was an interesting idea, and it's fitting for our podcast. We're Movie Changeup. These are the actual reboots we get to talk about today, which honestly don't come up that often in our show because we're rebooting things that maybe haven't seen reboots or remakes before, or lesser known movies. So I think we get to talk about now some have been on our previous brackets, a couple of them, but for the most part, we're talking about movies that I don't even know how the rest of you guys mainly feel about it. More Bobby than anyone else because half of these we probably saw together. But I'm interested to see what Joe and Tristan's thoughts on some of these movies are that have never really been brought up. So I think that'll be real interesting, and I'm excited.
All right, and next I'll go to Bobby. And my question for you is, what was kind of your strategy? Because how I'll say this before I go to Bobby, how we kind of compiled our bracket is everyone submitted their top 10 for the category, and then I figured out, okay, what's the crossover, and we ended up having 21 movies between the four of us. So I took those 21 movies and ranked that, took one out, one of the bottom ones that was only on one list, and so we came out had 20 movies overall, and then seeded them by the Rotten Tomato score to kind of make it more interesting than last week. Last week it kind of went by chalk because we went kind of by our own rankings. So I decided, hey, let's switch it up, have a few more upsets, and go by Rotten Tomato seeding. But Bobby, what was kind of your thought process in your top 10 and compiling your top 10? Did you go by rewatchability factor? Did you go by how it kind of ranks over the original or the movie that came before it? What was your thoughts?
It was more just my feelings on the movie overall, which some of it was rewatchability. I didn't really take the first one into. And Tristan is doing something there, but I didn't really look at the first one too much, just how much I actually like the reboot or remake or whatever it is. Yeah, so there's a couple that I definitely put on there because I've seen it a million times, whether it's on TV or something that I just put on myself, and it's a rewatchable movie, and some that I haven't actually watched like rewatched a bunch, but I loved it when I saw it and it stuck with me and I just know the movie well from that. But yeah, it was more just the movies that stood out for me. I made my original list and then I kind of did a quick Google to make sure I didn't like miss anything that I love. There's some movies that were on the border like of my list that ended up making the bracket that I'm curious to see now that it's going to go up against something that I chose, how I really feel about it, in this kind of format. So I'm looking forward to it. It should be a fun bracket. I like the idea, especially including all three of these categories.
All right, and Tristan, my question for you is: can you explain the reason for doing the having the controversial choice of wearing blackface for today's episode?
Well,
Wow.
when you want to reboot or remake
Wow.
something, people once in a while, they make a big mistake when they reboot. So I'm here to represent some of the bad remakes and reboots. Uh, Once in a while, you have a good idea, you think you're gonna make it work, and then it doesn't work. Unfortunately, my camera is not working today. I had some battery issues, but I'm still here to talk about some great remakes and reboots. I think remakes can sometimes get bad raps in conversations about movies. People are like, "Oh, there's too many remakes, too many reboots are always so bad," and most of the time they are. But we're here to talk about some of the ones that stood out as really, really good ones, and some of the ones that impressed me. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation here.
All right. So before we start eliminating some of these movies, let's talk about our bracket. In the top left corner with the 1 seed, we have Toy Story 3, and that will be facing off against the winner of The Thing and Dread. And in that same side of the bracket, we have The Little Shop of Horrors going up against 310 to Yuma. In the bottom left corner of our bracket, we have in the 4 seed Casino Royale, and that will be facing off against the winner of Ocean's 11 and Prometheus. And then in the 5 seed, we have Star Wars The Force Awakens, a revival of the Star Wars franchise. And in the 12 seed, we have 2005's King Kong, directed by Peter Jackson. In the top right corner of the bracket, we have the revival of the Mad Max franchise, Mad Max Fury Road, and that will be facing off against the winner of Rise of the Planet of the Apes and Cruella. Also in that corner of the bracket, we have Martin Scorsese's Best Picture winning The Departed facing off against Blade Runner 2049. In the bottom right corner of the bracket, we have Creed going up against the winner of Dune and Cape Fear. And finishing off in our final matchup, we have Invasion of the Body Snatchers going up against one of my all-time favorites, Batman Begins. All right, so
A lot of rough lineup, a lot of rough matchups there.
surprising number of these movies came out in 2015, I believe. The Force Awakens, Creed,
Creed.
and I think Mad Max Fury Road, but I could be wrong.
Yep, it did. I believe that was 2015.
Yeah, it was because I was in Denver when I watched it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so our first matchup of the day, we have The Thing versus Dread, and I'll give a quick backstory of both these movies. The Thing came out in 1982, directed by John Carpenter. We actually talked about it last week for our horror bracket. It's about a research team in Antarctica who is hunted by a shape-shifting alien that assumes the appearance of its victims. And in the 17th seed, we have Dread. It came out in 2012, directed by Pete Travis, written by Alex Garland. In a violent futuristic city where the police have the authority to act as judge, jury, and executioner, a cop teams with a trainee to take down a gang that deals with reality-altering drug slow-mo. Kind of an interesting matchup. We have two remakes. The Thing, obviously a remake of The Thing from Outer Space, and Dread, a remake of the Sylvester Stallone classic Judge Dredd. And I will go to Bobby first. I believe The Thing was on your list.
Yeah. Yeah, I think The Thing was my number 10 pick, and I really like this movie. I think it's a very rewatchable horror movie with a lot of entertaining characters, a good premise that leads to a lot of kind of tension. We talked about it a lot last week, so that's why it's on my list. I do like Dread a lot. I think it's really well done, and it was very underwatched when it came out. But overall, I think it's just the simple kind of premise. Like, it works for the movie, but I don't think it elevates it over The Thing for me. But these are two close ones. Like, if I was the only one with The Thing and you all chose Dread, I'd understand it. But to me, The Thing is just a much better. It is a better movie in my opinion. Even if Dread is a pretty rewatchable, fun ride.
All right, and I will go to Tristan next. Where would you vote between The Thing or Dread?
It's rough because we just praised The Thing so much last week that it was like freshly great in my head. So I was going into Dread with like high expectations because it had to really live up to The Thing in my mind to surpass it, and I was impressed by Dread. I thought it was a lot of fun, a really good action, and I think it was very impressive just because it came from such a bad movie. You mentioned the Sylvester Stallone classic. I don't know if I would call it a classic because it was definitely one of those like infamously terrible movies. So I think it
It's
had
called
this.
sarcasm, Tristan.
I mean, obviously, but this movie Dread had a much bigger uphill battle. It was going up against bad word of mouth from the original and memes of the original being so bad, and having to go against that campy ridiculousness of that first movie and make it into a really good action movie. I think is a really impressive kind of arc for that director in that movie. But ultimately, The Thing is an all time great movie. It's like a top tier movie for me, and Dread is an entertainment movie, a really fun movie, but The Thing is an all time great movie. And even though I think Dread does have a better arc as a remake, I do want to give the vote here to The Thing because I think The Thing is just overall a better movie.
All right. I will give my vote
Yeah.
next, and I will say I had Dread on my list. I'm a big fan of Dread. I like the action in the movie. I like a lot of the shots in the movie, especially when dealing with the drug of slow mo.
Hmm.
I think it's in a world where we lack, I think, a lot of female villains. I think the villain in the movie, Ma, is a really kind of interesting villain. As she's kind of like the controller of this big, massive complex in Mega City One. And I kind of like the choice of sticking with the comics of Dredd not removing his helmet. Not something you could usually get a star to do. I don't think Carl Urban is exactly a big movie star, which has probably helped with that choice. It's not like a Tom Cruise where you feel like you got to sell the movie on his face. So with that, I talked about, if you watched our podcast last week, you'll know probably why I'm not voting for The Thing. And if you're confused, why isn't that guy voting for The Thing? It's a classic. Watch our horror bracket. So I'll plug that. And without saying any more, my vote obviously for Dread. So votes 2-1. Johnny, are you gonna make this interesting, or are you gonna stick with everyone else and vote for The Thing?
Well, I'll say this: The Thing I do think is a classic, but it's a movie that I basically checked out for the first time from start to finish before our horror bracket. So I just wanted to make sure I saw everything on the list. Dread was one of the only movies I hadn't seen going into this bracket, so I checked it out last night. Everyone's been telling me since the day that Dread come out, Johnny, you'd love this movie. It's totally for you. Alex Garland's your boy. He wrote it. It's got fun action. I say the two biggest sins of action movies for me are going through it and not having one standout action moment, and two, using a lot of slow mo. And that is exactly what Dread did. There was nothing very memorable about it. I thought it was fine. I thought it was like a shoot 'em up, like you go in, you have some fun, you forget everything that you watched as soon as it ends. So it's like a mediocre action movie that didn't really have a lot to work with. So I give it some credit for that. As Tristan mentioned, it is a remake of one of the dumbest movies ever made with Sylvester Stallone. But it didn't stand out to me, especially in a world where the raid exists. Like the whole movie just feels like the raid, but replace any cool action sequence with like digital blood and boring gunfights. So it wasn't really for me, and I was disappointed by it. I still think it's okay, but yeah, the thing wins this one pretty easily for me.
I do like how you gave the directing credit to Alex Garland on this, even though he basically
wrote
directed
it.
Yeah,
the
he wrote
movie.
it.
Oh, I thought you said he directed it, but
No, the guy who directed it did Vantage Point, another very bad movie.
Yeah.
yeah.
All
But
right,
Alex
so,
Garland was basically rumored to take it over and direct it essentially.
yeah, there's a lot of rumors that he really like ghost directed it the same way Steven Spielberg ghost directed Poltergeist. So,
Poltergeist.
all right,
Or
so
so they say.
with that, The Thing advances to the next round, and we jump down to the bottom of the bracket with Ocean's 11 versus Prometheus. Ocean's 11 came out in 2001, directed by Steven Soderbergh. It's about Danny Ocean and his 10 accomplices who plan to rob 3 Las Vegas casinos simultaneously. And then in the 20 seed, we have Prometheus. It came out in 2012, directed by Ridley Scott, a guy who really loves superhero movies, and it's the description is following clues to the origin of mankind. A team finds a structure on a distant moon, but they soon realize they are not alone. And we started with Bobby last time, and I will kick it off to Tristan. Where would you vote? Prometheus or Ocean's 11?
I want to start off by saying that I just watched Ocean's 11 for the first time today. I'd seen bits and pieces of it online throughout my life on FX and things like that, but it always to me felt like a movie I just caught scenes of and never really fully watched it all. But I just recently bought the Blu-ray set of the trilogy a few weeks ago by happenstance, and then we did this, and it was one of the movies that came up. So I said, "Oh, I guess I'll check out the first movie on the trilogy," and I was really impressed by it. It's a very sleek, cool movie, and I think I watched it and was really able to compare it to movies similar to this today, like not just the Ocean's movies of today, but like Red Notice and things like that, where they take the big name celebrities, put them all in like a cool movie together, and they try and sell it as being this cool, fun action kind of sleek thriller, and they all feel like kind of pale comparisons to what I just watched last night. And I was really, really impressed by Ocean's 11. I thought it was one of the best of those, like bringing all the celebrities together and putting them in this awesome kind of movie together. I thought they all had really cool moments, and all the actors I think had moments to shine. And I was like enthralled. Sure, the heist of it like was just fun to watch, and having all the plan go awry and go where it was supposed to go. I just had a really great time watching it. So I was really, really impressed by that. I was coming on here ready to do a fight for Prometheus because I love Prometheus. I think it's a really exciting direction for Alien, the franchise, and I loved what this idea is with David, and I thought it had a really great lead performance in that movie. I think it's gets a bad rap a lot from people as like, oh, Prometheus sucked, it ruined Alien, and I think for me it was probably the best sequel to Alien. I like it more than any other Alien sequels, and I wanted to come out here and fight for it. But I watched Ocean's 11 last night, and I was so happy with it that I think I'm just going to go ahead and give the win to that one, even though it wasn't on my list at the time. But I liked it a lot.
All right. And I will say this. Ocean's 11 and Prometheus were both only on one list each. And Tristan said, Prometheus is the only movie on his list, and the only person that had Prometheus on their list was Tristan, and he just voted against it. So is there anyone here that wants to vote for Prometheus and would rather see Prometheus move on, or can we just say that the one person that would have championed Prometheus just voted it out? So we could probably just advance Ocean's 11.
I mean, I didn't have either on my list, so it's honestly pretty close for me, but not close because I'm like a huge fan of Prometheus and then I'm really championing for Ocean's 11. It's because I think both movies are okay. I think Prometheus is fine. I think it has a lot of bad and a lot of good. It has great performances and like the real scary scene with the chest burster abortion stuff, but then it also has Charlize Theron running straight forward while a building falls on her, which is the dumbest thing ever. And Ocean's 11 to me has always just felt like a cable movie. It doesn't really stand out against the other ones to me. But it led to Logan Lucky, and that's my favorite of like the Soderbergh style heist films. So I'll give the win to Ocean's 11. Right. We don't have to make it a fight.
All right.
I'm not that strong behind
I'll make it. I'll be quicker in that I actually really like Prometheus like Tristan, but Ocean's 11 is a lot more entertaining and way more rewatchable. So I'll go with Ocean's 11.
All right. Ocean's 11
and Brad Pitt eats a lot.
He eats in every movie.
He does. He eats, but that movie, it's like every scene.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Every time he's on screen. And sometimes it changes what he's eating, mid-conversation, which is great.
All right. And so next we jump over to the top right corner of the bracket. And we have, wrong button. Rise of the Planet of the Apes versus Cruella. And get to my thing here. Rise of the Planet of the Apes came out in 2011, directed by Rupert Wyatt. It's about a substance designed to help the brain repair itself. Gives advanced intelligence to a chimpanzee who leads an ape uprising. And then Cruella, the 18 seed, came out this year, 2021, directed by Craig Gillespie. It's a live-action prequel feature film following a young Cruella DeVille. So thanks for that plot, IMDb. And with that, I am going to go to Johnny. I know you haven't seen Cruella, but
I was gonna say, yeah.
probably not the best person to start off with. But I didn't realize that.
That's
until...
fine. I'll make it quick because the only thing I've seen from Cruella outside of the trailer is the mom getting murdered by Dalmatian scene, and that's one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. I don't care what the context around the whole rest of the movie is. That's one of the worst scenes I've ever seen. It did bring me a few seconds of pleasure watching that on Twitter, but Rise of the Planet of the Apes almost made my list. It was kind of like one of those just barely missed. It would have been like my number 11 or 12 out of my 10. So while neither of these are on my list, Cruella's not one that I'll ever probably check out or feel worth seeing. But Rise of the Planet of the Apes is the start of one of my favorite franchise reboots of all time.
All right. And I will go to Bobby next. Cruella or Rise of the Planet of the Apes?
I'll say Cruella surprised me how much I actually did enjoy it. Especially Emma Stone's performance, but Johnny did see the worst part of the movie. That is a really dumb scene, but it is pretty quick, and it leads to motivation and other things that they kind of use throughout the movie, which is fine. But it was an entertaining movie, and Emma Stone was really fun to watch. It was well shot, well directed. But Rise of the Planet of the Apes, I think, is a great movie and very underrated and kind of overshadowed by the next two movies, especially Dawn. Even though those names still don't make sense to me, but
I still get confused.
Yeah, but it gets overshadowed a little bit, especially because it was Rupert Wyatt directing it, and obviously he was taken out, or he did not continue on with the franchise. But I think it's a really, really well done reboot. That whole trilogy is fantastic, and I think it's a much better movie than Cruella. Even though Cruella surprised me and it was fun. It's worth a watch, but Rise of the Planet of the Apes, I think, blows it out of the water.
All right. And Tristan, your hype around Cruella is what inspired me to watch it. So I will go to you next. Are you going to make this interesting, or are you going to go with everyone else and stick with Rise of the Planet of the Apes?
Look, I'm a big fan of the Planet of the Apes franchise. I think it has a great history of advancing visual effects. It has a great, iconic character in Caesar, and then they rebooted it, and made the Andy Serkis ones that are cool and awesome, but they're not Cruella. Cruella was a really great surprise. Cruella had a really cool, ambitious style, and I thought it was a really fun movie to watch. And in the era of Disney making all these really empty, terrible shot-for-shot animated movies that are essentially just reanimated in live action, things like Lion King and to an extent Aladdin and Jungle Book, like even though they're okay, entertaining movies, they don't do anything to really change the movies or advance the characters or do anything to add to the original movie in any way. And I think Cruella is ambitious in a way that it could have just been a shot-for-shot remake of 101 Dalmatians, and no one would have batted an eye. But instead, they did a really cool, big, expensive movie with lavish costumes and really fun performances. And if you thought that scene was kind of fun and ridiculous when the dogs attacked that mom and you laughed at it, like you might laugh at the rest of the movie. But it's a fun movie to watch. I had a great time watching it, so why not? I'll give the win to Cruella because I'm sure it's not gonna make a difference in the end. So
Delays the inevitable.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we're all voting for which one is going to get slaughtered by Mad Max Fury Road. Let's be honest here. But I'm going to agree with a lot of what Tristan said. I think I think Cruella is a fun, exciting, entertaining movie. I was pleasantly shocked by how much I didn't hate it. I think Emma Stone gives a really good performance in it. However, I love Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I think that might be maybe the most underrated trilogy of all time. Just because all three movies are really good, but no one, like as far as like pop culture goes, no one really talks about those movies or references those movies, and I think they kind of tie into the first Planet of the Apes movie really well. I think that one actually like pushes forward filmmaking with like the whole Caesar thing and all of the CG work that went into that. And I think Rise of the Planet of the Apes is easily just the far superior movie. And so with that, in a 3-1 vote, Rise of the Planet of the Apes advances to the next round.
Yay.
Next one.
Cool.
And like I said, we're all looking at that bracket, being like, Mad Max is probably going to win the next one, but spoiler alert. And so with that, we jump down to the bottom corner of our bracket to finish out round one. A quick round one because of all the buys. But we have Cape Fear versus Dune, and I will pull up the descriptions really quick. Dune, the 14th seed, came out again in this year, 2021, directed by Denis Villeneuve, his first appearance on this list. It's a feature adaptation of Frank Herbert's science fiction novel about the son of a noble family entrusted with the protection of the most valuable asset and most vital element in the galaxy. And then at 19, we have Cape Fear, came out in 1991, directed by Martin Scorsese. Again, his first appearance on the list. It's about a convicted rapist released from prison after serving a 14-year sentence, stalks the family of the lawyer who originally defended him. I will go to Tristan first. Hopefully, unlike the last time I went to somebody first, you've seen both of these movies. What are your thoughts on both, and where is your vote going to go?
Yeah, I've definitely seen both of these movies. I think I had them both on my list if I remember correctly. But of course, recency bias is pushing me towards Dune because I just saw it and it was such an enthralling, huge experience and kind of like a cultural moment for movie fans as well. It felt like such a big return to the theaters, not just a return to Dune, but like a return to the theaters in a big way. So I thought that was a really great experience. I think what kind of is going to hold Dune back potentially in some of these future matchups is that it is just a part one and not like a complete thing. And I think it's kind of hard to look at it as a remake of the previous Dune when it's just kind of like the first part of it. And it's kind of a little bit hard for me to judge it as a whole when we don't quite even know how the story's going to wrap up and where they're going to go with it. It feels kind of incomplete in a way. But it's still a great theatrical ride. I mean, you sit there in the theater and you look up at those ships, you look up at the scope of the action around you. It's just enthralling in every second of it, And they had an uphill battle against that previous movie, which is something that I think I appreciate in these remakes and reboots. And I was trying to rank them myself as like which ones had harder battles to win. And I think Dune had a bigger battle to win because it was going up against, for most people, like a bad movie. Like they didn't necessarily know the books, but they know, oh yeah, David Lynch made that movie a couple of decades ago, and I heard that was bad, or I saw it and it was bad. So I think that had a bit of a bigger uphill battle for me than Cape Fear. And even though I think Cape Fear was great, there's some other Martin Scorsese remakes on the conversation that I think are going to go a little bit further than that. So Cape Fear, I think, is a really good crime thriller, really enthralling and really great performances, especially from Robert De Niro. I think it's a really raw Scorsese movie and one that I think gets overlooked compared to some of his bigger movies, more of his like mob movies that are more unlike this. So I think Cape Fear is one that people should give a watch if they haven't seen it, because I think it's gotten kind of buried in Scorsese's filmography. But Dune is so impressive that I got to go with Dune. It felt like not just a reboot of Dune, but a reboot of like going to the theater.
All right. So Tristan votes for Dune. Johnny, you've seen both of these movies. Where are you going?
I really like Cape Fear. Like Tristan mentioned, it's one of the underrated Scorsese films. It's a great remake. You get the family dynamic from Jessica Lange and Nick Nolte and Juliette Lewis is this, kind of dysfunctional family, and then Max Cady, enters in and has the real creepy flirtation with Juliette Lewis, and it's done really well. I love that you have James Bond, the great James Bond actor Jodan Baker in it, and Robert Meacham makes an appearance in this one, and he was Max Cady in the original, so I like when they do things like that. And it's super watchable. It was like one of my favorite movies at the time I saw it, when I was probably too young to have watched it, but like him being underneath the car really stood out to me. But Dune, as soon as I watched it, blew me away, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. And I'll probably rewatch it again shortly. And I just watched it like a couple weeks ago. So Dune just is one of those that sticks with you. And when Dune Part 2 comes out, or whatever they call it, that's going to be my most anticipated movie of that year, no matter what else is coming out, for sure. So Dune sold me on it so much to the point that I downloaded the audiobook, and I really like the whole story, and I'm excited how they interpret the second part. But Dune blew me away. So while Cape Fear is a very watchable movie, Dune I think is like just one of those masterpiece type of films that we're going to look at. If part 2 is as good as part 1, we're going to look at it and be like, this is Denis Villeneuve's masterpiece work, his, Dune movies.
All right. So, Bobby, are you going to make this interesting or send Dune to the next round and eliminate Cape Fear?
I'll be pretty quick. I agree with pretty much everything Johnny and Tristan have said, where I do really like Cape Fear. It's a great movie. But Dune, I think we will look back on it, especially if part 2 lives up to what part 1 is, as one of those kind of watershed moments in film, and just a great kind of sci-fi masterpiece. So I just love the world it created, the performances as well, especially Rebecca Ferguson. I thought she was great. And obviously Timothée Chalamet is the lead, but I'm gonna go with Dune. It really just throws you right into that world, and you get lost in it, and it portrays the politics well, the story, the visuals, the direction, and so I'm gonna go with Dune. Even though, watch Cape Fear; it's a really good movie.
All right. And so with that, Dune advances to the next round, and we hop back over to the top left corner of our bracket, where we have Toy Story versus The Thing. Classic movies that are both very similar to each other,
Toy Story 3.
Oh yeah, Toy Story 3 versus The Thing. Two very, very similar movies. So, Toy Story 3 came out in 2010, directed by Lee Unkrich. In this one, the toys are mistakenly delivered to a daycare center instead of the attic right before Andy leaves for college. And it's up to Woody to convince the other toys that they weren't abandoned and to return home. I will kick this one off. I'll say I'm a big fan of Toy Story 3. I think we were all right around the perfect age for when it came out. We were all right about to head to college, or either just started college. And for me, I've gave my thoughts on The Thing. I don't want people... At this point, I feel like people are going to think I hate The Thing. I don't. I think it's good. I just much prefer Toy Story 3 and the story of it. And I think, granted, there was a Toy Story 4, but I thought it was a perfect wrap-up of that story, of that trilogy, especially for a movie to come out 11 years after the one before it. Usually, if that happens, the movie always sucks. But this was arguably the best one of the trilogy. And so I'm going to vote for Toy Story 3. Tristan, where is your vote? The Thing or Toy Story 3?
Yeah, I was saying my praises for The Thing. I think it was a really great movie to advance practical effects, which is something that I loved, and we talked about that a lot in our horror episodes. So if you want to hear me go gushing on about practical effects, especially in The Thing, you can go back and watch that. And The Thing I watch all the time. For me, it's one of my all-time favorite horror movies and one of my all-time favorite movies, and I constantly think about it and go back to watch scenes of it and look at the screenshots of it to look at the effects. And I always will credit The Thing as one of my turning point movies into loving movies today. But Toy Story 3 was such a powerful viewing experience. And when you think about the idea of this episode is the reboots and revivals, I think sure, The Thing is a remake of the original, but no one really thinks about oh, did it do it better or worse? It's kind of its own thing in its own way. But when you think about the potential of a reboot or the potential of a revival, I think Toy Story 3 shows the height of that potential. The fact that you can come back to this old franchise, and sure, there's a fourth one, but at the time, Toy Story 3 was we're going to round it off right now. We're going to give you a finale to these characters' emotional arcs, and we're going to have you let go of your childhood as you let go of these characters. And I think it's a kind of a height that these reboots have aimed for and never quite reached. So I think even though I do think The Thing is a better movie, I'm going to give the win to Toy Story here because I think it's a better revival or reboot, and was just a great experience to watch.
All right, and I will go to Bobby next. The Thing or Toy Story 3?
Yeah, both these are on my list, but one of them is a lot higher than the other. And like I said, The Thing is great. It's a very rewatchable movie. Like Tristan said, the effects are amazing to look back on. But Toy Story 3 is just such a special watch. And like you said, at the time it came out, with us who grew up with it and then had it come out, for me, it was a year into college. And all the emotional beats that they hit in the movie with them holding hands, and then also just uh, being given away at the end of the movie and all that. It's really well done. It's how you should wrap up a trilogy. Even though I did like Toy Story 4, but really it probably should have stayed with just the three movies. But I think Toy Story 3 is just, especially for our age group, is a very special movie. So I'm going with that one.
All right, so looks like Toy Story 3 is advancing. Johnny's vote doesn't matter, but Johnny, what are your thoughts on either The Thing or Toy Story 3 advancing or whatever as I update our bracket?
We've had 2 weeks in a row now praising The Thing, but Toy Story 3, I echo all the same sentiments. It's just an incredible film, and it really captured the essence of like growing up and growing out of your childhood toys and stuff like that you had connection to. So just overall, kind of like that just movie meant a lot to me when it came out and still does to this day. And The Thing is a classic, but I just watched it recently. So Toy Story 3.
All right, and so with that, we move on to our next matchup, which is Little Shop of Horrors versus 310 to Yuma. Little Shop of Horrors came out in 1986, directed by Frank Oz. It's about a nerdy florist who finds his chance for success and romance with the help of a giant man-eating plant who demands to be fed. And in the 9 seed, we have 310 to Yuma, came out in 2007, directed by James Mangold. It's about a small-time rancher who agrees to hold a captured outlaw who's awaiting a trial to go to court in Yuma. A battle of wills ensues as the outlaw tries to psych out the rancher. Johnny, your vote didn't matter last time, and so I will let you kick off with the first vote.
I really enjoy both of these movies a lot. I don't know if anyone else had 310 to Yuma on their list, but I know it was on mine. Little Shop of Horrors was like another one that just barely missed the cut. I have seen Little Shop of Horrors more times. I find it like endlessly rewatchable, and I'll check it out for all the performances and the songs. It's one of my favorite musicals, and I'm not a huge fan of the genre as a whole. So when one stands out to me, I love it. But 310 to Yuma is a genre that I do love, westerns, and it's one of my favorite westerns ever made. The remake of 310 to Yuma, it was really what, at least for me, put James Mangold on the map. And we've obviously echoed sentiments of loving his work and wanting him to reboot more things on our show. But this is the movie too that really introduced us to Ben Foster. I don't know what he was in before this, but this is the one that, like, after this, anything he was in, I was sold on. And he, later we get that performance in Hell or High Water with him. So, yeah, I really, really love 310 to Yuma. I think it's a fantastic Western and a great remake. And I'm going to vote for that and take Philly outside because he's losing his little shit.
All right, and I will go down to Bobby next between 310 to Yuma and Little Shop of Horrors. What do you think?
Yeah, this one's really close for me. I've seen Little Shop of Horrors a lot more. Like Johnny said, it's a very rewatchable movie. It's very easy to watch. It's just a fun movie with great music and visuals and performances. 310 to Yuma, though, I've only seen a handful of times, but it really sticks with you, especially like Johnny said, Ben Foster. But I mean, it's got a stacked cast with Russell Crowe and Christian Bale, even Peter Fonda, and James Mangold's style. That's kind of the first time you saw him with the Western take that you eventually got to see more in Logan, the kind of gritty movie that he can do. And yeah, this one, it goes back and forth, but I think it comes down to what I think is just the better overall movie. And I think that is 310 to Yuma for me. Neither of these were on my list, but they would have been really close. Little Shop of Horrors didn't come to mind because I always forget that is a remake because I always just think of that version. But I think I'm going to go with 310 to Yuma, even though they're both great. I think just it's a better movie overall, and Little Shop of Horrors is just kind of like a fun ride.
All right. Well, I will say this. I have seen neither movie, so I can't vote in good conscience. So with that, 310 to Yuma would advance. But I will let Tristan sing the praises of Little Shop of Horrors
You want to sing them?
as that's
Yeah.
that's a
I would.
phrase,
I
okay?
could warm up a little bit.
That's the phrase, I think. Okay, sing the praises. So I will let Tristan sing the praises as I update the bracket.
I think Little Shop of Horrors gets forgotten as a remake, and I think it gets overlooked by just how ambitious it was as a remake, because it's not just a remake of the Roger Corman movie that is based on. It is also a remake of the off-Broadway show that was inspired by the Roger Corman movie. So it has to appeal to like a lot of different demographics, and it's remaking the movie and also remaking the musical. And if you know the story of the movie's production, they had two different endings. They had the original director's cut ending that was based on the musical, and it test screened the audience. People didn't like the tone of it, thought it was too dark, so they reshot it, made a movie, an ending more faithful to the Roger Corman movie that was kind of like the theatrical ending of the movie. So I think it's interesting that there's two different versions, both based on different things that are being remade by the same movie. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit on the show about remakes and reboots. And I also wanted to mention the songwriters, Alan Menken and Howard Ashman. If you know their names, you know them because they are basically the single reason that Disney had their golden age renaissance a couple years after this movie came out. They're the writers behind Little Mermaid, Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, a lot of the biggest movies that kind of revitalized Disney at that time. And they only launched because of this movie. So I think we owe a lot to this movie in terms of a lot of the movies that we love as kids. So I think it is a really big, important movie in terms of changing the way musicals are looked at and the impact of music and movies. So I give it the win for me, but it looks like it's not going to be making it too far.
All right, and like I said, 310 to Yuma advances, and that means our next matchup is Casino Royale versus Ocean's 11. Two fun, sleek kind of action movies, so it should be a fun matchup. I already talked about Ocean's 11. Casino Royale is our 4th seed. Came out in 2006, directed by Martin Campbell, and this is its second appearance in our bracket. It won our James Bond bracket, I do believe. And the plot is, after earning 00 status and a license to kill, secret agent James Bond sets out on his first mission as 007. Bond must defeat a private banker funding terrorists in a high-stakes game of poker at Casino Royale in Montenegro. And I will kick off the vote since I didn't even vote last time. I love Casino Royale. It's before we started our basically 2 months of Bond, which was supposed to be a month of Bond, I had never really seen a Bond movie, and Johnny told me, hey, start with Casino Royale because it's kind of James Bond's origin story, and I did, and I loved it, and no movie in the Bond franchise was really able to match it. Some came close, mostly the ones in the Craig lexicon, but I really liked it a lot more. It's definitely the Bond movie I'm going to go back to and watch again. But Ocean's 11 is a movie I grew up on. I love it. I've watched it, I don't even know how many times. It comes on TV, and I'm going to watch it. I'm going to watch it to the end. I've even went back and watched the original with Frank Sinatra, and that movie is not good. It's very bad. It's definitely the type of movie that should be remade. Like, hey, here's a movie that's got a fun, cool plot, good cast, reboot it with an interesting cast, and it's just like, hey, let's rob a bunch of Vegas casinos with the top stars in Hollywood. And I really like that movie. It's in my top 25 of all time, and I give Ocean's 11 my vote to advance to the next round. But I will go to Tristan next because he's also a Bond newcomer like myself. So I'm curious to see what he thinks. He both recently watched both these movies, so for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I'd seen Casino Royale. It was actually the only Bond movie that I'd seen before we did any of the Bond binging. So it was the one that I was kind of familiar with. But yeah, Oceans I just literally watched today, so I'm super familiar with that because I just watched it. But it's difficult because I think both of these accomplish different things. I think Ocean's 11 is definitely a great remake of an original movie. Like Joe mentioned, it took the original idea of let's put a bunch of cool people together and put them in a heist movie, and then it did that just better and slicker and cooler. And I think I've only seen it the one time, but I'm already kind of itching to get through the rest of the franchise or maybe give it a rewatch. I don't know how well the sequels are actually received among people. I don't even know anything about them. Oh, bad.
Ocean's
Well,
12 is bad. Ocean's
12 is
13.
bad.
Ocean's 13 isn't as good, but it's still a solid
Yeah.
movie.
I haven't seen 8. Ocean's 8.
I'll give you a spoiler alert in Ocean's 12. Julia Roberts' character, uh, they have her sneak into, I believe it's a hotel, and
Yeah.
Julia Roberts' character happens to look like a celebrity Julia Roberts. So and to trick Bruce Willis. So Bruce Willis plays himself, and Julia Roberts plays a character pretending to be Julia Roberts because of how much she looks like Julia Roberts. So.
Yep.
And they're all like, I don't think she looks enough like Julia Roberts. And it's very, and it's like,
It's really
this is
meta
like
and weird.
one of the major plot points of the film. This is not some like small little thing. This is like the whole second act of the movie.
Look,
Yep.
you guys are just making me want to watch it more and more at this point.
I think Tristan would really love Ocean's 12 now that
Yeah.
Look, Casino Royale, I think, is an incredible movie. I think it definitely revitalized the Bond brand in a way. It definitely feels like a revival to Bond and a refreshing new start to Bond. And it literally is kind of like an origin story to Bond. So I think it works in that way of refreshing the franchise and giving you a way in. It's definitely an exciting movie to watch. I mean, we talked a lot about it already in the last month, so I don't even know how much more I can say about it. But yeah, great movie and definitely a great entry point and a refreshing point for Bond. But I want to give the win out here to Oceans. I think as a remake, it's a more of a remake, and I think Casino Royale is kind of a reboot of Bond, but not really. Like, it's just doing the same thing Bond has done pretty much every time, and it brought a new actor and kind of threw out the canon and started again, and it brought a new actor, threw out the canon a bit and started again, and it doesn't feel quite like a new thing in the way that Oceans feels like a genuine, true remake that's faithful to what the idea of the episode is. So I give it the win because I think Casino Royale should not be considered a remake, revival, or a reboot.
All right. So I'm curious because I think I know where the other two votes are basically going to go. So we can explain, and you guys can vote, or we can just go straight to the battle and save time.
Yeah. Okay. This is my number one movie for one thing. So you know where that's going is Casino Royale. But yeah, I don't know how we want to do that.
I'll say this because I feel like the one point I can argue against Tristan for, we've said everything we need to say about Casino Royale. Check out the James Bond bracket. It literally, spoiler alert, won the whole thing, and we said everything that you could possibly say about the movie. Ocean's 11, again, is what it sets out to be. It's a fun cable movie, and it's a dad movie, so obviously Joe loves it. But Casino Royale is like the definition of a reboot because they went in having killed the franchise with Die Another Day and saying we need to throw out everything and completely start new. They got the rights back to the original story of Casino Royale, so they rebooted it all. It's a whole new, everything that, they bring back Judi Dench, but she's essentially playing a different version of the M that she played before. But they threw everything out. They said, we need to make it cooler. We need to make it, today's audience. Like, what are they going to be into? We can't go over the top ridiculous like Die Another Day. They rebooted everything from the cast to the tone to, just everything about it. They just grounded it more. They made it cool again. It is the Batman Begins to Batman and Robin, and that is the best time to reboot a franchise, not like the Spider-Man movies have done when it's like, the franchise has only been over for a couple of years, and the last movie was meh, but now we're just going to reboot it again every like 5 years. This was we need to reboot it to keep James Bond alive, and they did it and succeeded, and it's, I think, a bigger franchise now than it was in the 90s and probably the 80s. So I think Casino Royale is definitely the definition of a reboot. And while, Ocean's 11 is a remake, no one gives a shit about the original one. People are actually fans of the Bond franchise, and this saved that franchise. It's not like anyone sees Ocean's 11, thinks, oh, that's a good remake, I should check out the original. Like, don't check out the original. Don't do what Joe did because it's bad. So it is a remake, and it's a better movie. It's it's more fun to watch for me, at least. Like, it's just everything about it. Like, it's actually more cinematic. Like, Ocean's 11 is just like a fun comedy that you throw on and it has famous people in it. I don't know. I think that the difference between Bobby and I's consideration of Casino Royale to Ocean's 11 is much different than the difference between Joe and Tristan's level between both movies.
Yeah, it is not close at all for me. Like Casino Royale, like I said, is my number one ranked reboot. It's my favorite James Bond movie by far, and one of my favorite movies of all time. It did its job perfectly of rebooting the character and giving us a true Bond origin story for really the first time. Daniel Craig blows it out of the water as Bond, and he's given us, I think, some of the best Bond movies and performances we've ever seen, and starting with Casino Royale. And Ocean's 11 it's fun. It is a very fun, easy watch. I like it. It's very stylish and slick, but it kind of, there's really not much behind it. If you really go into like the heist, most of it doesn't really make sense. It's kind of cool to see
it makes sense.
It doesn't make sense.
What do you mean it doesn't make sense? It makes all the sense. They shut off the power to the casino to unlock the door.
Look, they do a good job of doing the go back and explain, and this is really what was going on, even though we weren't showing you this and stuff. And it's fun, and that's the stylized thing that Soderbergh gives you, and it's a fun watch. But for a movie that is trying to be super intricate with the plot and like that be kind of the big reveal, like it does its job okay, but it's not like it executes that on a perfect level either. It's just fun and entertaining because the characters are fun and they're very famous.
Logan Lucky did it better.
Logan Lucky did do it better. I agree.
One of these.
I agree with that.
If I were to rank them, Logan Lucky would be of the Oceans, Soderbergh, whatever. I would rank it number 2. It's very good. I love Logan Lucky. I just love Ocean's 11 more. I feel like, for me, Casino Royale is a copier where it just copied like Jason Bourne and the type of action movies that were popular in that time. Ocean's 11 is an originator. All of these movies that came through and are like, oh, we want to do what Ocean's 11 did, whether it was, even Red Notice that came out very recently, or like the Fast and Furious that are all these like celebrity-driven kind of action heist movies. Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, or whatever the fuck that movie is. All these movies that still 20 years later are like, oh, let's...
That movie is nothing like...
Yeah, I'll say that, like...
celebrity-driven heist.
Joe, we're not changing Joe's mind, and Bobby and I are not changing our mind, so it comes down to Tristan.
Yeah.
I will say that I do feel like Ocean's 11, I'll give Joe that point, because I think Ocean's 11 feels like a bigger kind of moment where, like, people are still trying to chase Ocean's 11. Like, they're still trying to make the next Ocean's 11. And I think Casino Royale is just one of the many like Batman Begins style remakes of the era. I think Ocean's 11 stands out a bit more of like, you still see it cited as like people want to make the next Ocean's 11. And I don't think anyone really cites like they want to make the next Casino Royale. Let's say we're going to make the next Dark Knight. We're going to make the next Batman Begins. We're not going to cite Casino Royale.
I think the next Bond movie is going to say we need to make the next Casino Royale. Just like Soderbergh, every movie he's made since Ocean's 11 is just trying to recapture that, and didn't until Logan Lucky, which he finally improved upon the original.
I do think the Casino Royale is a better movie than Ocean's 11, and I think that
there it is.
The reason that I was holding it back is because I think that I was struggling to qualify it in the idea of a remake or a reboot or a revival, because I think it didn't necessarily do anything new for the. It put the franchise in a new direction, but I don't think it did much more than the other movies did.
And revived it, and I think it was in a
very
really
different feel, and it's a very different feel than the Bond movies had had, especially in a very, very long time.
So let's say that I'll go ahead and say if we're counting Casino Royale as a remake, reboot, revival, I'll go ahead and give it the win over Ocean's 11, even though I do think it is a great movie.
You suck. You're kicked off the Disney Plus week.
I will say this though:
if he's kicked off, then we need to still win.
Tristan wants to make a fun argument and say Casino Royale, not sure if it counts. Cruella made this list because of Tristan, I assume.
Yes.
And that is not a reboot, revival, or remake. It's just a prequel to a character we saw in an animated movie.
It's a revival of the 1001 Dalmatians,
But like, it's not something. Wow, that's a lot of Dalmatians. Yeah. But like, if they never make another Dalmatians movie, it's not any of this category. It's just a prequel to a character that's been introduced in movies. So that one definitely doesn't qualify. So you can't argue that Casino Royale doesn't when Cruella did.
Yeah, I was gonna argue, like I was gonna bring it up to like Tristan of when everyone submitted their list that it didn't count, and then I saw it was like gonna get knocked out immediately, and I'm like, yeah, I don't really care that much to argue against. I'm too lazy to send a text.
Look, I think it's already dead. We've already killed Cruella, so we don't have to debate. But Casino Royale, okay, we'll give it the win then, I
All right.
guess.
All right.
Past is dead. Kill it if you have to.
Exactly. Speaking of our next movie, number 5, Star Wars: The Force Awakens.
Speaking of heated debates,
Came out in this could
Oh
be
my
interesting.
God.
Came out in 2015, directed by J.J. Abrams. The plot is, as a new threat to the galaxy rises, Rey, a desert scavenger, and Finn, an ex-stormtrooper, must join Han Solo and Chewbacca to search for the one hope of restoring peace. And then in our 12th seed, we have King Kong. Came out in 2005, directed by Peter Jackson. It's about a greedy film producer who assembles a team of movie makers and sets out for the infamous Skull Island, where they find more than just cannibalistic natives. And for this, we talked about the last one for a while. I don't remember who kicked it off, but I will let Johnny kick this one off. Star Wars: The Force Awakens or King Kong?
I'll say this. The one thing I can say for The Force Awakens is I had more fun in the theater watching The Force Awakens than I did watching King Kong in the theaters when it came out. It was bringing back Star Wars. It was kind of one of those movies that you watch, you don't think about, and you have a lot of fun with it. And then the more you think about it, upon rewatches, upon everything that we got afterwards, it just is all diminishing returns. And to the point where I like walking out of The Force Awakens, I was like, oh my God, Star Wars is back. And now Star Wars is dead to me, and The Force Awakens is dead to me, and I don't care for it at all anymore. I don't care about watching it. It doesn't have anything memorable that I want to ever really check out again until Star Wars, one day reboots itself and maybe is good again. King Kong is a movie that I've gone back and forth of being like, it's really good, to it's over long and boring, to I think this movie's a masterpiece, to finally setting on it's just a really, really well-made movie, and it led to a lot of amazing things. It led to a lot of the amazing motion capture we've gotten. I know that this was, after the Lord of the Rings movies and its circus doing King Kong, but we don't have the new Planet of the Apes movies without this, or like the level of motion capture. I think this was such a step forward for everything. It deserved a Best Picture nomination that year. It would have gotten one if it was 10 instead of 5 movies. It's a movie that just, if you just haven't watched it in a while and check it out, like, I think there's so many sequences in that movie that'll blow you away. I love all the performances, and King Kong fights dinosaurs. Like, that's more memorable than anything that happens in fucking Force Awakens. So King Kong, easy victory for me here.
All right.
And we'll see if that continues.
Bobby? Hopefully you've seen both of these films.
Yeah. Oh, I have. I've seen both of these in theaters. And you know what? King Kong, I do enjoy the movie, but I tend to agree that it is way too long for its own good, and could have been edited down. But it does its story well, but it's just too long, needed to be edited, and it's I enjoy it. But The Force Awakens, I could point out the flaws, and yes, I can go look back after watching The Rise of Skywalker and criticize a lot of the stuff that they went on to do with the franchise, but this movie was very special to me when it did come out. I loved it. I saw it in theaters multiple times. I rewatched it at home multiple times. I think it set up a possible good trilogy really well. And, Star Wars is a big property, but the movie itself had to be good to be something that was breaking all the records, make over $2 billion. It made a big cultural impact. So just culturally at the time of its release, and to me personally, it had a much bigger impact. I love Kylo Ren, and that is the storyline that does play out relatively well in the franchise until the very end. I know The Rise of Skywalker has some stuff I disagree with as well with that, but I think we get one of the best Han Solo, Harrison Ford performances. I think that Rey is set up as a great lead of the franchise, and I think that it is exciting. It does have a lot of memorable moments for me, like the first time we see Kylo Ren catch a laser, the actual beam from the blaster. I think that's a really cool scene. I love the last fight scene and the visuals of it in the snow. So to me, it's the Force Awakens, and it's not very close. It's kind of like Johnny's wasn't very close for him. I can look back on this one individually instead of as a franchise as a whole, because I don't like the third movie in the trilogy and what they did and how they concluded the story. I love how they started it.
All right, and we will go to my Disney Plus co-host next, Tristan. King Kong: The Force Awakens, 2005 versus 2015.
I'm going to say that King Kong, I'll echo Johnny's statements here, that it advanced technology really far. And I think the motion capture that we get credit like Planet of the Apes for, and also like Lord of the Rings, we point to those movies as like these big like watershed moments, especially for Andy Serkis and his like career for as an effects artist. And I think sometimes this movie gets overlooked in that arc of effects. So I want people to definitely know this is one to go back and worth the watch. It's definitely long, but I personally don't mind a long movie. I sat through Zack Snyder's Justice League twice in the same day, so I can do
Jesus.
I can do long movies. But yeah, King Kong is definitely a good one to watch. And I think speaking of like the Zack Snyder Justice League, in a way, I think this is one of those versions of a movie where it's like they gave a director all he ever wanted to make, and he had this really big, long, epic take on a movie that I think is got kind of bashed by critics, and people said, "Oh, it's overlong. It's way too self-indulgent and all that kind of stuff." I think it gets kind of put in that same box of like these tour directors being given a bunch of money to make a movie that kind of didn't fully go over well. So if you like those kind of movies, it might be one worth checking out to get your opinion on one of those kind of like divisive movies. But The Force Awakens, like you talk about a remake, a revival, like a revival of the franchise. I never felt more hyped about a franchise when I walked out of Force Awakens, and I was like, wow, Star Wars is not just alive, it's like better than ever. Like the potential is so high, and ultimately, like, sure, the Rise of Skywalker didn't also necessarily deliver on what this movie set up in my mind, but like I was enthralled watching this movie. I remember it's like it set the high for these types of movies where it's like we're gonna take something that you guys love from your childhood, we're gonna bring it back, and it's gonna be a bunch of like nostalgia, repeating of the same thing, kind of, but just new enough that it's not just the same thing over again, you know. And I think that's something that a lot of these other reboots haven't necessarily captured. It's like they don't know how to balance bunch of fan service, bunch of references, or is it going to be really different, really subversive? And I think this movie found that perfect middle ground to walk, where it was giving you what you liked about the original trilogy, and also giving you something new to latch onto and new characters that I thought were genuinely really interesting, especially Kylo Ren. I thought he was a fascinating character all throughout the trilogy, really, even though the last movie kind of botched a lot of things. So yeah, I think as a revival, I'll always remember walking out of this movie and being genuinely like revived for the franchise. So I'm giving the win to Force Awakens.
All right. I'll say this.
Mm.
I love both of these movies. I agree with Johnny on a lot about King Kong. I think it's 3 hours and like 15 minutes. Movie could have been 4 hours, and I would have been here for it. Like, King Kong's great. I remember I went with my dad to see it in theaters. I don't know why that's like a weird movie for both of us to go see. But it was a really good movie. I think Jack Black. I think this was kind of the early beginnings of his somewhat dabbling in like dramatic roles. I mean, it was like a slightly comedic role, but still dramatic. I love the reference to Fay Ray that they have, where they were like trying to get Fay, because they were like off to shoot a movie, and they're like, oh, we gotta, we should get Fay Ray or whatever they said. And Colin Hanks is like, oh, I think she's working on another picture, which would have been the like original King Kong, I guess. However,
The superior Ray.
yeah. However, I love Star Wars. I love The Force Awakens. I'm not a lover of The Rise of Skywalker, but I'm still higher on it than I think everyone here. But I don't think The Rise of Skywalker affects The Force Awakens as far as this argument. The Force Awakens 100% revives Star Wars. It opened to like $247 million, which was, insane back then. People were projecting it would have a massive opening of like 175, 180, and it completely blew even that away. I think before then the highest December opening was like $100 million. So I don't know if a movie has ever revived a franchise more than The Force Awakens revived Star Wars, or And so, for me, as much as I love the original King, or well, not the original, but the 2005 King Kong, my vote is for The Force Awakens. And so with that, The Force Awakens advances.
Lame, bad takes.
It's gonna be a tough argument in a
Johnny,
second for that one.
yeah, you got killed by the rest of the movies, but I can separate it from that.
But like, even if this movie is bad on its own because the whole movie is essentially a remake, plot wise, of basically two movies we've seen before. Comes to the same conclusion as those, and the whole rest of the movie is just asking questions for someone else to answer, and then it ended up just being JJ giving really bad answers to those questions. So you don't actually get anything that appeasing from it, and they completely botched the death of the most famous character in the franchise. So you guys are wrong. It will lose its next round no matter what. I'll make sure of it.
Well, it
so
won.
Whatever. It advances, but undeservingly so.
All right. So next up we have I forgot. Let me look. Next up we have Mad Max Fury Road versus Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Mad Max Fury Road also came out in 2015, just like The Force Awakens, directed by George Miller. It's our 2 seed, and it's about an post-apocalyptic wasteland. A woman rebels against a tyrannical ruler in search for her homeland, with the aid of a group of female prisoners, a psychotic worshiper, and a drifter named Max. And I will start with Bobby. Where are you thinking? Mad Max Fury Road or Rise of the Planet of the Apes?
So like I said last time we brought up Rise of the Planet of the Apes, I think it's a great movie, and this trilogy is amazing. If we were going to rank this trilogy versus the Mad Max movies, I would take the Planet of the Apes trilogy. But on an individual movie basis, I think that Mad Max Fury Road is amazing. It's such a visual spectacle, and it throws you right into the world, and it's nonstop. It's pretty much right from the beginning. It's essentially a long chase and then a ride back towards where they came from, but they pull that off really well. Give you great characters with Furiosa and Max and that dynamic, and it's just the craziness that they show with the guitar guy with the flamethrower and all that, and Nicholas Holt's character, who's just endlessly entertaining whenever he's on screen. I think there's just way too much good about it. The score is amazing in this movie as well. Obviously a Best Picture nominee. So to me, it's not very close, even though I like both movies. It's definitely Mad Max Fury Road.
All right, I'm gonna make it quick. If you're watching the video version of this, I changed my little avatar name down there to a Morton Joe, the villain in Mad Max Fury Road. I love that movie. It's great. I watch it once a year. I love Rise of the Planet of the Apes. If I were to rank maybe the trilogy versus just Mad Max Fury Road, like Bobby said, I might give it to the trilogy, but just like Bobby said, on an individual basis, Mad Max Fury Road, I think, blows Rise of the Planet of the Apes out of the apocalyptic wasteland. And so with that, my vote, Mad Max Fury Road, and I will go to Johnny next.
Yeah, echoing the sentiments, I'm a huge fan. I'm a bigger fan of the Planet of the Apes franchise as a whole than I am the Mad Max movies. I just rewatched Beyond Thunderdome, and the most exciting sequence of that film is in the third act. There's the car chase scene. Mad Max Fury Road said, we're going to take the best aspect of the old movies and we're going to just make that our entire movie. They really understood what they were doing. Rise of the Planet of the Apes does a good job rebooting. This would be more of a fight if it was Dawn against Mad Max, but in the end, Mad Max Fury Road is one of the best movies to come out in the 2010s. It is incredible from start to finish. There's so many amazing sequences, and I'll always give as much as I love the motion capture in the Dawn or in the Planet of the Apes new movies. I'm always a sucker for amazing practical effects, and that's what Mad Max Fury Road is full of. So Mad Max Fury Road, even though I like Rise, Mad Max gets the easy victory for me.
All right, so this looks like it'll be probably a clean sweep, but I will let Tristan give his thoughts as I update the scoreboard.
Yeah, I'll echo the praise for Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I think in terms of an actual revival of a franchise, I think it's more successful because Mad Max Fury Road came out and was this awesome, huge, successful blast, and the franchise has gone through a lot of production problems since, and I don't know if we're ever going to get another movie in that franchise at this point. So it's one of those kind of disappointing things where it revived interest in the franchise, but it ultimately didn't actually revive the franchise itself. So I think that is kind of disappointing in terms of Fury Road. But other than that, I mean, it's an absolutely incredible movie. It's such a fun blast. And Johnny mentioned earlier during Dread about how he kind of judges movies by like having these oh shit moments in the action where you're like kind of you're blown away by what you're seeing. And Mad Max Fury Road, it's like you'll have an oh shit action moment and then it'll cut to just another oh shit action moment and then cut to like another oh shit action moment like in a row. And it's like it's such an ambitious movie and really blows you away. So I'm definitely giving the win to Mad Max here. Yeah, if we were doing like the entirety of the trilogy against like the entirety of the Mad Max franchise or something like that, it might be a win here because I do love all the Planet of the Apes movies, even the old ones. But I think Fury Road as an individual movie, it takes all the ideas of the Mad Max franchise and turns them up to like a million. And it's yeah, we mentioned just Immortan Joe, really a great character and so many great practical effects that I'll always remember. The guitar guy with the flames, but also just like the Tom Hardy and the characters swinging around on those kind of like branches that are going back and forth. It was very inventive in its effects, and you can call it just a big long car chase, but when the car chase looks that fucking awesome, it's like you can give me as much of that car chase as you possibly want to give me. So yeah, I'm giving it to Mad Max.
All right, with that, Mad Max advances, obviously. And we move down to our 7 seed versus our 10 seed, and that is The Departed versus Blade Runner 2049. Our 7 seed, The Departed, came out in 2006, directed by Martin Scorsese. It's about an undercover cop and a mole in the police department who attempt to identify each other while infiltrating an Irish gang in South Boston. And then we also have at our 10 seed, Blade Runner 2049, came out in 2017, directed by Denis Villeneuve. It's about young Blade Runner K's discovery of a long-buried secret, which leads him to track down former Blade Runner Rick Deckard, who's been missing for 30 years. And Tristan, your vote didn't really count last time, so I will let you start. And I just want to say I think it's interesting that Scorsese and Villeneuve had to go against each other both times. So.
Yeah, Departed is one of those really, really iconic remakes. It's one of those movies where you tell someone it's a remake and a lot of people don't even know because it's been so well received on its own that it's become like so iconic as its own thing. But I also think it's one of those movies that people who are really into the original film will come out in droves to tell you how, oh, actually the original is a lot better than the remake and you should go watch the original. And the original is kind of has this big following as well. It's one of those movies that it gets overshadowed by its remake. So I think Departed has kind of like an iconography in that level among remakes. And there's a lot of great scenes and a lot of great twists and a lot of great performances. I think it really is one of those embodiments of Scorsese's mob era filmmaking where he just stuffs it with all of his iconic actors and they're all on this like gritty city kind of life. It has a lot of his themes in there. But for me, those are never the Scorsese movies I personally love. I respect a lot of his mob movies, a lot of his crime movies, but I like a lot of his other movies more so than these. For me, mob as a genre as a whole has never really appealed to me, not so as much Scorsese, but just the genre generally. So this is one that never really stuck out to me as one that I always watched. I watched it once or twice, and I said that was a good one with good performances, but not one of my favorites. And Blade Runner 2049 is one of my favorites. You talk about a franchise that was completely dead, not even really a franchise. Like it was just one movie, and you take one movie and then decades later you pick it up and run with it again. And I think that's a unique thing among these reboots too, is you take something from that era. It's just it's not even a franchise to revive. It's just this one movie. You're taking the ideas and the themes, and it never should have been as good as it is too. So I think it's just like a really impressive, ambitious movie. We talked about Villeneuve earlier and his sense of scale and how he can really provide a great, huge, shocking image. And I think this is probably his best movie and deserves the win here. As a revival of the franchise, it's gorgeous, and I think it is just much more of an impact on me personally than The Departed did.
All right, I will go next. I echo a lot of what Tristan said. I like The Departed a lot. I think it's got some great moments, great scenes, a lot of really good performances. Matt Damon versus Leonardo DiCaprio. But I think Blade Runner 2049 was with Denis Villeneuve coming in to direct, you knew it had to be a certain level of quality, but it's kind of this, oh, we're doing a sequel to a movie for 35 years later. And it's basically this kind of very niche sci-fi movie that only really like hardcore sci-fi fans know or care about. And it came out and it was amazing. One of the best movies of its year, one of the best sci-fi movies of the decade, and it may be my favorite Denis Villeneuve movie. I think they kind of, what we were kind of talking about with The Force Awakens of like nostalgia plus new, I think it had that perfect balance of both, with bringing Harrison Ford back as Rick Deckard, had a touch of nostalgia but also a lot of new stuff going on, especially with like Dave Bautista's character in that opening scene. And so for me, it's an easy vote. I'm going Blade Runner 2049 as well, and I will go to Johnny next. You're muted.
You're right. So this one is much closer for me than for you two. I think The Departed is another one that, like, I know it won Scorsese Best Director, and that's what a lot of people I feel like kind of hate on it for, and they're like, well, that's nowhere near his best movie, and they just kind of gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award. But I think The Departed is one of his best movies. I find it endlessly rewatchable. I can start in any point, like if that movie, back when I had cable and this movie was on all the time, no matter what point I started watching, I would watch to the end. That's more than I can say for a lot of movies. All the performances are great, and it improved upon the original to me. And I usually prefer, like, especially with American remakes, I prefer the foreign film. But this had added so much to it that you didn't get in that one. Even with the character Frank, and in Infernal Affairs, you actually have like the two main people know who the other person is, like the whole movie, and it doesn't have nearly as much tension as The Departed does, and it doesn't have like the surprise, like crazy last 15 minutes. But yeah, Blade Runner 2049. I think this gets the win for me solely based on the fact that I don't give a shit about the original Blade Runner movie. We watched it. I thought it was dull. I wasn't into it at all. And then I saw Blade Runner 2049 and was like mesmerized from start to finish by it. I've watched it once or twice since then. It's going to be a movie that I want to watch on the biggest TV possible. Once a year, once every 2 years, something like that. The Departed, after I stopped having cable, is not one that I've frequently revisited, but I think Blade Runner 2049 is, and I think that's kind of my tiebreaker on it. I just think a lot of the visuals look amazing in Blade Runner 2049. I love the performances. It's just kind of, I can point to Scorsese films and say, like, these are better, have the debate, whatever. Blade Runner 2049 is right there as one of my top Villeneuve films, and I think it, and that led to him being the guy who's now making the Dune movies that I love. So I'm going to go Blade Runner 2049. But these were literally I think Blade Runner was my number 5 and The Departed was my number 6. So it was close, but I think Blade Runner 2049 just had that much more lasting impact after the first viewing than The Departed did.
All right. And Bobby, obviously it's, 3 votes, so your vote really doesn't matter, but I'll let you give your thoughts on these movies as I update the bracket.
Yeah, Johnny pretty much hit on everything that I would have said, as well as Tristan. But really, I think Joe too. But I mean, I think you, especially you, Johnny, brought up just the fact that the original Blade Runner, I liked more than you did, but I didn't fall in love with it. I wasn't attached to it at all, so I really didn't know what to kind of be excited for in Blade Runner 2049, and it blew me away. The world it created, Ryan Gosling plays that role very well, as well as bringing back Harrison Ford, and just other than being visually stunning, it connected me to a story that I didn't think I would be connected to, and characters that I wasn't necessarily connected to already from the previous version, even though they were trying to tie it back to that one. So The Departed is great. It, like Johnny said, on cable, if it's ever on, I'll watch it. And it's I think it is one of Scorsese's better movies, at least one of his more watchable movies. One that you wouldn't have to sit and watch like the whole thing to kind of get something out of it. So I'm gonna go with Blade Runner 2049, and put it, and that would have gone through anyways. But it was I think my number 4 and my number 7, so in the same ballpark as where Johnny had him.
All right. And so that brings us to our next matchup, which is Creed versus Dune. And we already talked about Dune, but Creed, our 3 seed, also came out in 2015, directed by Ryan Coogler. It's about former world heavyweight champion Rocky Balboa, who serves as a trainer and mentor to Adonis Johnson, the son of his late friend and former rival Apollo Creed. And I will go to Bobby, since your vote didn't count last time. I'll let you kick off this vote.
Yeah, I think this one is, to me, not that close now, because I think Creed is one of the best movies to come out in the past 10 years or so, especially for someone who grew up watching the Rocky franchise as much as I did. And it revitalized it in a way that I didn't think they really would, instead of just being kind of like Rocky Balboa, which I really do enjoy, but it wasn't anything that would make like a big impact as far as, on a film making level or anything like that. It was just, that's another good Rocky movie. To reboot it in this way and bring in Apollo Creed's son and Adonis, with Michael B. Jordan as the lead, and then putting Sylvester Stallone in the supporting role. I think that was brilliant. Got one of the best performances out of him, and an Oscar nomination for it, which he should have won. But Ryan Coogler did such a great job with the just the energy of this movie and the fight scenes, the character development of Adonis, and as well as his relationship with Bianca, and with Rocky himself. I think it did what it was supposed to do as far as a reboot, which is revitalize the franchise, and it gave, to me, one of my favorite movies of the past 10 years. And maybe in time this would get closer, but right now I can't get it past Creed.
All right. I will go to Johnny next. Creed or Dune?
So I think I saw Creed in theaters with Bobby, and I was blown away by it. I loved it. I had fun from start to finish. And I was championing for Stallone to win that Oscar, and he didn't. And since then, I have never rewatched Creed. I don't know if that says more about me or the lasting impact this really had on me. It would hype me up in the moment, but it's not ever something that I see, and I'm like, I want to revisit that. This might be recency bias, but Dune, immediately after watching it, I went back and watched most of the movie again, and then I'll probably rewatch it from start to finish in the next week or so. And it just gives me, for me, for what I'm looking for in a movie, Creed hyped me up and I had a lot of fun with it, but Dune gave me a lot to think about, and visually it's more appealing, and I love the performances, and it's just it's a movie that just stuck with me more in terms of something that I tend to go to in film more so than Creed did. I'll probably revisit Rocky before I revisit, Creed. So I'm going to go Dune, which again, I think they're one spot different in my rankings. And I would have told you you're crazy if, just even seeing the trailer for Dune telling you that I would have picked it in this matchup. But Dune's just stuck with me, and I've really been enjoying it a lot. And Creed, I just, for whatever reason, I've never felt the urge to go back and watch it again. So I'm going to go with Dune.
All right, I'll go next. I really like both of these movies a lot. However, I think Dune for me is still hard to judge without the part 2. It just feels like one half of a story. So, we get the second half of that story and it comes out and, they knock it out of the park and it's amazing and I love it. I think Dune shoots up in my rankings. It falls apart with the second half that I just have really no desire to go back and watch this first part. But with Creed, to me, it tells a full story. If we were to rank our favorite movie moments of all time, I think it might be, I know people talk about the locker room speech, and that was Stallone's big Oscar moment, but I think one of my favorite movie moments of all time is Stallone's speech to Creed right before the final round, where he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna throw in the towel. You're done. It's over." And Creed's like, "Oh, I gotta prove it." And Rocky's like, "Prove what?" And he's like, "Prove I'm not a mistake." And that's when all of the message, all of the theme, all of like the story, all of Creed's reason behind fighting, you know, comes into the forefront, and it's like shown exactly what his entire motivation is. You have the one-shot fight scene, which was great. All of the fight scenes introducing new things, like showing the players or the fighter stats as they come into the movie. I really liked, and I liked how they took like kind of shades of stuff from the previous Rocky, especially the first Rocky, and kind of switched it up, changed it. Him and Bianca's relationship isn't the same as Rocky and Adrian's. The relationship between him and Rocky isn't the same as between Rocky and Mickey, and I feel like they kind of told a different type of underdog story. And for me, it's not that close, and I would vote for Creed over Dune. And so that means Tristan either gets to send Creed on, or he gets to make this a little interesting.
Yeah, it's a difficult conversation here because similar to Johnny, Dune is much more the kind of movie that I go for. It's much more of like about the craft and the themes and the philosophy more so than just the thrill of the movie or like the action or anything like that. And I walked out of Dune and I was constantly thinking about what it was trying to say and what it meant, and also what was next and where it was going to go. And I can't wait to rewatch Dune, and I can't wait to watch Dune Part 2. Like, I really feel like it, similar to Blade Runner, this is a movie that in any other director's hands probably would have sucked and been terrible. But they gave it to a director who really understood craft and really understood the importance of like crafting a shot well, not just throwing up a camera and having the actors say cool lines and then CG and the rest of it later, because whatever, it'll make the fans clap in the theater, And I think Dune is much more ambitious than a lot of the sci-fi action movies we're getting right now. That being said, Creed is like one of my all-time favorite movies. I've seen it so many times. I think I've probably seen it like a dozen times. People talk about Rocky inspiring people to walk out of the theater and like change their lives, walk out of the theater and go work out, walk out of the theater and finally get in shape, finally do that thing you want to do with your life. And I walked out of Creed and I was like, fuck yes, I'm going to achieve everything I ever wanted to achieve, and I was like, I felt like so just engaged and inspired in the same way that I imagine people felt walking out of Rocky. So I think it not just revived the Rocky franchise, it kind of like revived the energy of Rocky when it came out, when everyone was working out and everyone was trying. I know that when this movie came out, it wasn't just me. I know a lot of people who watched this and were like, I'm getting in shape, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And this movie definitely inspired me to reach for my potential and do more than I was doing in my life at that point. And it's still one that I go back to remind myself that like I can still try to do better with my life and get out of the whatever rut I'm in at that point or whatever. If I'm feeling down, I watch Creed to feel good again, So I'm giving the win to Creed here.
Hell yeah.
And Dune is the opposite of all of that. But look, it's worked out for Tristan because look at those abs.
Yeah.
I know. Look, it inspired me to work out and look at my 8-pack.
Yeah.
All right. So with
Shredded.
that, Creed, our 3-seed Creed advances, taking out our 14-seed Dune, which,
R.I.P.
R.I.P.
For the
Dune.
audio listeners, Tristan's camera's back and he is clearly shirtless.
Sorry, guys. I didn't know I'd be on camera today.
He looks a lot like Adam Driver.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so our next matchup, we have our 6-seed Invasion of the Body Snatchers versus our 11-seed Batman Begins, which it's a little low. Fuck you, Rotten Tomatoes. So, Invasion of the Body Snatchers came out in 1978, directed by Philip Kaufman. When strange seeds drift to Earth from space, mysterious pods begin to grow and invade San Francisco, California, where they replicate the residents into emotionless automatons, one body at a time. Then we have our 11-seed Batman Begins, came out in 2005, directed by Christopher Nolan. After training with his mentor, Batman begins his fight to free crime-ridden Gotham City from corruption. You read it one way for so long, and then it's just part of the sentence, and you're like, this feels weird. Yeah. I will say, we have a lot of 2005 and 2015 in here. I'm excited for all the reboots and remakes we get in 2025, because they should be pretty good. But, I'm going to actually start with...
Spiderman Reboot.
Yeah, probably. I will kick this off with...
we'll be due for one.
Tristan. Where's your vote? Invasion of the Body Snatchers or Batman Begins?
This is really interesting because Batman Begins is a huge watershed moment for comic book movies, and I think it definitely proved to people that Batman, not just Batman, but comic book characters in general, could be taken seriously by like these artistic indie directors who are coming out and making these kind of ambitious movies. And I think I really am impressed that Warner Brothers was had the courage to hand such a big name of Batman to Nolan, who at the time was rather unproven. Like he was still a unknown kind of film house kind of director. Like people who are really into the film scene would have seen Memento and things like that, but he wasn't a casual household name by any means at all at this point. And I think it shows a lot of courage that I don't necessarily see from a lot of studios today to be this ambitious and to say, okay, hand it off to this director who's not even proven himself and let him just do it and not really overstep or interfere too much with it. So I think it definitely deserves some credit for that. But that being said, it's hard to rank Batman Begins as like this big revival return of Batman when the sequel outdid it in like every single possible way. And I think the sequel is very much like Batman Begins proved to comic book fans and to like film fans that it could be done. And I think The Dark Knight proved to like every single person in the world that it could be done. And I think if you could have included The Dark Knight, that's much more of a revival than I think Batman Begins is. I think Invasion of the Body Snatchers is remaking a bad, not a bad 1950s movie, but like a really cheap, low budget, cheesy 1950s movie, and also one that's been done a lot of times. And I think this particular version of the movie in 1978 definitely is the one that stands out and has really iconic moments, like the guy at the end pointing and screaming into the camera, and a lot of great practical effects too. So I think in terms of a remake of a previous movie, I think Invasion of the Body Snatchers is my win here. I think Batman Begins turns the tide of the Batman franchise, and then it kind of sets up the Dark Knight to be the true, genuine king that comes in there and like revives the franchise and truly kicks it into higher gear. So I think Batman Begins is not that level for me. So I'm going to go ahead and give the Invasion of Body Snatchers the win, but we'll see how it goes for you guys.
All right, I'm not gonna lie. Well, before I say that, I will say it was to jump a little bit on Tristan's point of handing that off to Christopher Nolan, who is kind of unproven. It's kind of strange to look back and realize that Warner Brothers was deciding who should take over the Batman franchise, Christopher Nolan or Darren Aronofsky, because I feel like there's two like very out there choices, and I'm very glad it went to Nolan because I've read Aronofsky's script and it's very, very bad. And they almost went with it. However, normally, if I haven't seen one of the two movies, I abstain from voting because I don't think it's fair. But Batman Begins is in one of my top 4 movies of all time. I'm a massive Batman fan. There's no way that I watch Invasion of the Body Snatchers and it even eclipses that level. I agree with a lot of what Tristan says about Batman Begins, except for the fact that I feel like it did revitalize and reinvigorate the franchise by taking it in a lot more of a serious tone. Maybe The Dark Knight was popular, but the anticipation for The Dark Knight was so high because of how good Batman Begins was. And my vote goes to Batman Begins, and I will go to Bobby next.
Yeah, in a similar way to you, Batman Begins, while it's not like in my top 4 movies or anything of all time, it's a very important movie to me, and I love the Batman franchise. And I do think it did, like The Dark Knight was the big cultural moment because of really Heath Ledger's Joker and everything that led up to it, but it's because of what they did with Batman Begins. And really grounding it, telling you kind of the true origin story of Batman for the first time, really, with the League of Shadows and all that, at least on the big screen. And it to come off of Batman and Robin, it was a really big risk to go this direction with Christopher Nolan and to do that, like you said. And Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like I think I've seen it once, and then I've seen like bits and pieces, and I remember liking it, but it made nowhere near of an impact on me as Batman Begins did. And I think it really did reboot and revitalize the franchise, even if The Dark Knight was the more popular film. But it was the more popular film because it was set up from Batman Begins. And the hype was all there because of what they did with that movie. So to me, it's Batman Begins, and it's not very close.
All right. Johnny, I know you're not 100% sure if you've seen Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but maybe you remembered you did and you realized you loved it. So.
I've seen at least two of them. I don't know if I've seen the 70s version or whatever this one is that we're actually talking about. I know I've seen there's like a 58 one. I've seen that. And then I saw the really bad 2004 one, possibly in theaters. All I know is Daniel Craig was in it. It's not even like a story that I find like super interesting. So going back and even seeing the best version of it, I don't think it would even eclipse like The Thing as far as what it's doing. So, and yeah, and Batman Begins, I do disagree with Tristan on one thing of, The Dark Knight came out and eclipsed everything Batman Begins did. I think Batman Begins is a better story from start to finish than The Dark Knight, but The Dark Knight is more memorable because it has those performances that stand out, which the Batman Begins maybe is missing. But I like the actual story that Batman Begins tells quite a bit. And I also think that same with Casino Royale, I think it's easy to understate how bad people thought like the Batman franchise as a whole were, and as well as James Bond after the previous movie completely destroyed it. And this movie just brought it back to life, and in such a way, like an amazing way. Like you don't normally get a reboot that's the best movie of the franchise, and that's what we got at the time that this came out. Because even like going back and watching like the 80s and 90s Batman movies, none of those hold up very well. And Batman Begins is awesome, and The Dark Knight is awesome. So it's Batman Begins for me. Whether I have seen Invasion of the Body Snatchers or not, I don't know. I've seen two of them for sure.
All right, so with that, I'm going to say Batman Begins advances as an 11 seed for some reason because Rotten Tomatoes is stupid. Even though it's owned by Warner Brothers, you think they'd hype up their own movies. But with that, we go back to the top left corner of our bracket to see which is the first movie to advance to the final four. We have the story of threes. We have Toy Story 3 or 3:10 to Yuma. And I will go to Bobby first.
All right, let me look at the bracket. Where are we at here again?
Toy Story 3 versus 3:10 to Yuma.
All right. So we've said our like long pieces on these movies when they first came up. And it's going to be Toy Story 3 is going to be a tough one when it goes against kind of the movies that I ranked ahead of it, which aren't that many. But I think just the specialness that it holds to me and a lot of us really as a franchise and as a revitalization of that franchise and the time that it came out and just being such a great movie itself is going to be a tough one to beat. 3:10 to Yuma is great. It's a really great Western, like we said. But I think Toy Story 3 beats it out here to me, and it's really just kind of what it did for as a reboot of the franchise itself, and just as a movie as a whole as well.
All right, and I'll go to Johnny next. Toy Story 3 or 3:10 to Yuma.
Yeah, as far as like the type of movie that I'll throw on, like right now, if I wanted to watch a movie, I'd go 3:10 to Yuma and not Toy Story 3. But Toy Story 3 is just a masterpiece, and I won't ever forget the feeling I had seeing it in theaters for the first time. And I have rewatched it since multiple times, and every time I enjoy it. But it was a special feeling seeing it in theaters and just having those nostalgic, emotional moments. Basically, 3:10 to Yuma is a super fun Western, but it doesn't bring those same feelings as Toy Story 3. So that's a win for me for Toy Story 3.
All right, and Tristan.
Yeah, I didn't talk too much about 3:10 to Yuma last time because I was trying desperately to hype up Little Shop of Horrors. But yeah, 3:10 to Yuma, I actually haven't seen the original, I don't think, but I do really like this remake. I remember watching it in theaters with my family, and my uncle was a huge fan of Westerns. So when he saw it, he was kind of the expert of the original and coming in and saying, oh, well, they did like this in that movie, they did like that in this movie. And he kind of introduced me to the idea of movies in a lot of ways. So I have a lot of good memories with him taking me to movies when I was a little kid, and this is one of the ones that I saw when I was young. And so I'm also on a Western kick after I watched The Harder They Fall, so I might end up giving a rewatch to 3:10 to Yuma because I've been looking for some good kind of contemporary Westerns because it's kind of a genre that is very, very dead in the modern times. Like we get occasionally a Western, and this is one of those like occasional Westerns that came out and was good. But in the end, Toy Story 3, in terms of like a revival of a franchise, in terms of bringing a franchise back to life and bringing all the people back together again to watch it, and kind of bringing not just the characters back, but like the themes of the original franchise and the ideas of growing up in childhood and moving on. That's been present throughout the entire Toy Story franchise. It wasn't just something they threw on because, oh, now the people are old, so we got to make them old now. And I think that's something that a lot of copycats have tried to do, where it's like, oh, we're going to bring back the same actors, but they're going to be really old, and it's going to be about how like they're old now. And I feel like this Toy Story 3 was able to do that and put the characters' lives genuinely at risk. Like my mind did not think rationally when they were going down that fire chute. I was like, wow, they're dead. They're about to kill the whole cast. Like that, this is it, you know? And I felt that moment. And to engage a full-grown adult that much into a kid's movie is something that I think is really impressive too. So I'm going to go ahead and give the win to Toy Story 3. Although 3:10 to Yuma, I do remember liking it a lot, and it's one that I want to revisit soon.
All right, and I have not seen 3:10 to Yuma, so it doesn't matter. So it really didn't matter which
Joe,
was voted either.
you gotta watch it.
I know,
It's
I know,
really
I
good.
love it. It's one of those things I haven't gotten around to. I will say one of my all-time favorite YouTube videos is there was these two like teenager kids that got their mom a copy of Toy Story 3 for Christmas, uploaded it onto their computer, and re-edited it so the credits started as they all embraced going into the
saw that.
fire chute, and then put it back in the disc, wrapped it up, gave it to their mom, and they watched it like Christmas night, and like they're all going down the fire chute, and then just the credits start, and their mom just starts like bawling and freaking out. Like, how can that be the ending? How it's a Disney movie? How can they? It's a great video. My description doesn't do it justice. You just need to look it up. And so with that, we might have a battle on our hands in the next round because we have Casino Royale versus The Force Awakens. And I'm just gonna start with the person who I know where their vote's going. They don't even really need to tell us their vote, but I will let Johnny go first.
I will reiterate, The Force Awakens' whole thing is being a remake of a movie we've already seen, every plot point essentially, introducing some fun characters, and then asking a bunch of questions that we never get a fulfilling answer to, as well as having one of the worst scenes in any Star Wars movie on Han's ship with the weird aliens where they completely waste the cast of the raid, as well as botching the death of Han Solo, as well as just, yeah, there was a lot of promise coming out, but I think that made it even worse how bad the rest of the movies are. I mean, The Last Jedi I liked, and then Rise of Skywalker is in the bottom 5 movies I've ever seen in my life, and killed the franchise for me. And Casino Royale, it was amazing, still is amazing, and all of the Daniel Craig movies afterwards I have a lot of love for, even the ones that some people think are bad, like Quantum and Spectre. So Casino Royale not only rebooted an amazing, like my favorite franchise of all time, but kept it going and followed through with its follow-ups, unlike Star Wars The Force Awakens.
All right, and with that, I will go to the person who currently has Kylo Ren as their face and see where their vote goes.
Yeah, I mean, I loved Casino Royale. It's a fun movie. It's a good action movie, but nothing is a revitalization of a franchise more than The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens, we talked about it enough how much we walked out of it hyped and ready for the future of the franchise, but I also want to counter some of Johnny's points. He's like, oh, the Han Solo death sucked, and no, it didn't. It was a great, really powerful moment, and I know people in the theater were sobbing afterwards because it affected them so much, and it's a moment that I think resonates throughout the franchise as a Star Wars fan, and I think it's one of the most powerful moments of the sequel trilogy. And I think the Rey versus Kylo Ren battle in the forest has incredible visuals. It's a really, really satisfying lightsaber fight at the end of the movie. It kind of builds up all the way to that, and I think it's a really great battle. You can say, oh, it's repetitive of the previous movies in a way, like, sure, because it had a lightsaber fight at the end, I get, but like it's not just they're blowing up Death Star base and then they win. Like, there's a lot more going on at the end of that movie than just the one thing that is repeated from the previous movie. And I think, yeah, I mean, revitalization of a franchise, the franchise is still alive. There's one bad movie that came out, but there's multiple TV shows coming out. There's The Mandalorian is like arguably Disney's biggest production that they have right now outside of Marvel. So like that's hugely alive, and that only happened because of this movie. And I think this movie kind of set the precedent of all of these franchises trying to come back to life, and all of them are failing because they just can't capture the lightning in a bottle of what this movie was. So I think I'm giving this a win because it is that lightning in a bottle moment. Like, everyone went and saw this. Everyone was hyped afterwards. Everyone was ready to see more Star Wars. and I think that gets the win for me for it.
All right, and with that, I will go to Bobby. I think. Or oh, no,
Yeah, this
there.
one in 20. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. You're good. There was just a slight delay,
Hello?
but you're. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Gotcha. Yep. Can you?
Yeah, you can
I
go.
can hear you talk.
Yeah, it's your turn. Go.
All right. Okay. All right.
Make the right decision. Do it.
In
You just quoted
2015
Star
when
Wars and
this,
telling him not to pick Star Wars.
Exactly.
I think
'cause he
I'm
knows.
very delayed because I'm talking while you guys are talking. But in 2015, when The Force Awakens came out, this would have been a much closer battle, because I was so hyped on Star Wars at the time. It really did revitalize the franchise, and it got everyone excited. Everyone was speculating about the next movies. It introduced some great characters with a lot of really good promise. But looking back on it, I still love The Force Awakens, but to me, it doesn't quite hold up as much as going back and watching Casino Royale as a whole movie, because it does have its faults where it is kind of repeating some beats, and there's some character stuff that's set up in that movie that is a little bit more disappointing now that you have seen where it goes. And Casino Royale is just a masterpiece all the way through. I think it reboots the character of Bond better than I think it reboots anything in The Force Awakens does for Star Wars. But Bond is just not as big of a franchise as Star Wars, so it didn't make as big of a cultural impact. But to me, it's a much better movie now looking back on it, even though The Force Awakens is a really fun movie to watch. I love it. It's a really great movie, but there's a reason that it has gone down in my rankings of movies in itself since it came out in 2015, and Casino Royale has stayed in its spot since 2006 and maybe even gone up. So I'm going to go with Casino Royale.
All right, so I guess that comes to me. I'll say I disagree with a lot of what Johnny said. I like the Han Solo death. I think it works on multiple levels. Kylo Ren, new, fun, interesting character that has a good arc. I would say a newer Bond fan. I think Casino Royale was the one I started with, and I loved The Force Awakens when it came out. You want to talk revitalizing a franchise. It basically reinvigorated Star Wars, a franchise that was basically on death's door, kind of forgotten about. I said for a while now that if Avatar 2 came out in 2015 and The Force Awakens never came out, I think the Avatar franchise would be where Star Wars is now as far as pop culture.
Dead.
But, I still
Dead to
think...
me.
But, Mandalorian's one of the biggest, shows out there. I think The Force Awakens definitely revitalized Star Wars more than Casino Royale revitalized James Bond. However, to me, this isn't a what movie revitalized their franchise more. This is a what movie is better. And one of the things I've always said is I love the world of Star Wars more than I love any individual piece. And if you had to tell me rank what movie is better, Casino Royale or The Force Awakens, my vote would be for Casino Royale. And so my vote for today is to vote for Casino Royale to advance to the next round.
That's
the correct decision.
Bad call.
And I love The Force Awakens, way more than Johnny does. Obviously, he doesn't like looking back on it, but yeah, Casino Royale is just different. It's just special.
And it led to an exciting conclusion.
It did.
Even
We'll
though
talk
we had to
about
go
one of
through
the
a bunch
best
of bad
movies this
movies
year.
to get to the good one at the end.
We didn't, though, because they're all amazing.
And none of them are as good as The Last Jedi was, and hopefully we get another one someday. I'd love to see what Episode 9 could be. Hopefully they make one. Weird they never did.
If they just remake it and pretend it never happened and continued off what The Last Jedi actually did, maybe The Force Awakens gets knocked up a couple points to me, but it'll
But
never
also,
compare to
we've
Casino
seen
Royale.
what happens when you continue Episode 8 and just still make an equally bad script with Colin Trevorrow's script, because that thing was fucking hot trash too. So, all right, next up we got to see which is the third movie to advance into the final four, and that is Mad Max Fury Road versus Blade Runner 2049. And since we started with Johnny last time, let's start with Bobby.
This one's really tight for me. I think, man, it goes back and forth. If you look at my Joe, I don't know if you saw my original list or remember it, but these are my number 3 and number 4.
Ah,
So these are very close. And it kind of depends on the day. When I made the list, it was Mad Max 3 and Blade Runner 4. These are two of the best reboots that I've, of a movie or whatever you want to call them for these ones, revitalizations. And I think it comes down to what I think could be a masterpiece. They're both masterpieces of the genre, but honestly, I think today, just on an entertainment level value, because I can go back and forth and tell you all the good things about both movies, I think I'm going to go with Mad Max Fury Road here, just for the pure craziness and entertainment value on something that was so kind of unexpected at the time, and what they did with the practical effects with that and everything. And this one's really close for me. It's probably like 51-49 or even closer if you can get any closer than that. I'm definitely an interesting one to go to first, but I think today it's Mad Max Fury Road.
all right. It's an interesting choice. I will go to Tristan next.
Yeah, Mad Max Fury Road is an awesome, entertaining movie. It's an absolute blast to watch, and it's like the epitome of great action movies for me. It's one that I'll always constantly, like, if I'm going through the channels and it's on, I don't even care what I'm doing the rest of the day, because now I'm watching Mad Max Fury Road, and it's constantly entertaining, and I'll give it that. But I think Blade Runner has the win for me here. You mentioned the practical effects of Fury Road, and that's definitely a remarkable part of it. But Blade Runner also has incredible effects, and I think effects that are much more ambitious in some ways than Fury Road even was. And both of these have big, large-scale ambition that are trying to revive a franchise that was long dead. But I think for me, Blade Runner 2049 does a better job reviving it. It doesn't just come back to the world and give you an awesome action movie. It comes back to the world, gives you an awesome movie, and also revives the themes of the original movie in a way that makes you kind of think back and question it, not just in a way that's like, remember this, remember that. It's in more of a Last Jedi way, where it's like trying to challenge your perception of the original movie and put it up against like the pedestal of nostalgia in some ways. And I think this is a really great movie to come out in the era of all of these empty nostalgia grabbing reboots. To have this come out and be this good is really, really impressive. So I'm going to go ahead and give the win to Blade Runner for me, because Fury Road is a great action movie, but I think Blade Runner, it takes everything about the original movie and just does it in a much better way, modernizes it, and has just that little salt of nostalgia without actually having to overwhelm you with repeating beats like Force Awakens does.
All right, and I'll go to Johnny next.
One of these is my number 4, and one of these is my number 5 on my list. So I'm right there with Bobby of these being very close. One of these is my number 24 in my top 100 movies of the decade. The other is my 31st movie of the decade. Both of those, the higher one is Mad Max Fury Road. Blade Runner is incredible, and I love it. And it did something with the franchise I never really saw potential in me, like, really loving. But Mad Max Fury Road took something that a franchise that always had a lot of potential and then maximized upon that potential to me. And exactly, maximized. So I think Fury Road gets the win just because, like Tristan said, both movies have amazing visuals, but I just tend to prefer, like, I'm more impressed by practical effects than anything CG will ever be, and I think that is like the kind of just the difference maker here. I do think you probably have a couple better performances in Blade Runner 2049, but Charlize Theron is also amazing as Furiosa in Fury Road. So just for the guitar man with the flaming car alone, I'm going to go Mad Max.
Who doesn't love the Doop Warrior?
Exactly.
But
The Doop Warrior.
exactly.
Should have been my name.
Yeah. I will say this. One of the things when ranking movies is rewatchability. One of these movies I've watched like 6 or 7 times now. One of these movies I've only watched twice. The one I've watched twice is Blade Runner 2049. While good, I think the length for me, it definitely tells a story. It doesn't feel overly long, but it's just a hard movie to go back to, where Mad Max Fury Road's a movie I could throw on anytime I want. I agree with everything pretty much everyone else says, But for me, that's where my vote goes, is Mad Max Fury Road. And so with that, Mad Max Fury Road goes on to the final four. And that leaves our final matchup of the Elite Eight as Creed versus Batman Begins. And I will wait a second while I finish typing this because my brain stopped working. We're back. Alright. Creed versus Batman Begins. I feel like I know where someone's vote's gonna go, and so to save the suspense, I will start with them. Tristan, Creed, or Batman Begins?
Yeah, I mean, I love Batman Begins. I tried to roast it earlier to have it stand at any level of chance against Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but I think it's a great movie, and even though I do think it pales in comparison to the sequel in terms of practically everything, I think it really did a good job of proving that Batman could actually be an interesting character, not just Batman, like I said, but the entire genre in a way. I think it does get overshadowed by its sequel in a way that it doesn't necessarily deserve, because I think there are great performances in this and there are great action sequences in this, and you can see Nolan getting his footing for this kind of a scale of filmmaking because he had never worked on something of this level before. So it's very fascinating to watch this again, especially when you see how much Nolan grows as a director and how much his craft grows, and you can see him kind of testing the waters in some of his style here. So I like going back and watching that again. But for me, Creed is just an enthralling, incredible movie, and I think it captures not just the idea of Rocky, but like it kind of repeats the beats in similar ways, but not really. It kind of repeats the themes in similar ways, but not really. So I think it has that perfect embodiment of what a reboot revival can kind of be, where it's sort of similar, but it's different in so many ways that you don't even notice that it's similar. And I think Creed, for me, is a constantly rewatchable movie. I'll watch Batman Begins if I'm going to do a trilogy watch of Batman movies, but I'm never just going to sit there and watch Batman Begins. But Creed, I can throw it on whenever and just watch it. And Batman Begins is one that I only really watch as one part of a whole. And I think Creed stands alone as a single incredible movie by itself that enraptured me and enraptures a lot of the themes of Rocky. So I'm giving the win to Creed here.
All right, I'll go. This is the 1 and the 3 on my list with Batman Begins and Creed. So I love both of these movies. Creed, I agree with everything Tristan said. Of basically, it's kind of old and new mixed together. They basically tell a similar story of Rocky, but tell it in a new way with Creed, with modern camera techniques and all of that. It's great. I've never had to pee more in my life than the final fight, but I was not leaving my seat. I'm like, if I pee myself, I pee myself, but I'm not leaving my chair, man. That's just how it is. However, Batman Begins, like I've said earlier, is in my top 4 favorite movies of all time. I fully disagree with Tristan of how it's lesser to The Dark Knight in every way. I feel like I agree with what Johnny said. I feel like the story in Batman Begins is better than The Dark Knight. And I feel like Batman Begins is a better Batman movie than The Dark Knight. To me, I love The Dark Knight, but it feels very much like just a cop movie where the cop dresses like a bat. It doesn't feel like a Batman movie. Gotham has its own feel. It's not just like generic Chicago city skyline. It has this vibe of, of what I would want Gotham City to be, especially when you're talking comic book movie reboots, instead of using the same old villains that they always use, like how Superman can't get away from using Lex Luthor or Zod. Christopher Nolan's like, oh, I'm going to use this random villain that no one but, like, hardcore comic book fans have heard of with Ra's al Ghul. Sure, Scarecrow's in there, but again, he's not a big-time villain. He's like, I'm going to tell a great movie with a villain no one has heard about or no one really cares about. Bring in a great actor. And yeah, Batman Begins to me just crushes it on every level, and it's endlessly rewatchable. So is Creed, but for me, it's a personal decision. Both movies are great, but Batman Begins gets the edge. And I will go to Johnny next.
Yeah, like I said with Creed, like I had a lot of fun with it, and I've never gone back to it. Maybe I go back to it and I love it, and this is more of a discussion for me. But Batman Begins is my number 2. Creed is my number 9 on my list, so they're both on it. Don't want to discredit Creed for that, but Batman Begins, I think, is incredible. Batman and James Bond are like my 2 favorite characters of all time and favorite franchises, and Casino Royale and Batman Begins are the reason for those in a lot of ways. So Batman Begins I have similar feelings about to Casino Royale. So this one is well, I liked Creed a lot. Batman Begins pretty easy victory for me here.
All right, and Bobby.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because, the franchises alone, Batman to me means a lot more than the Rocky franchise, even though I enjoy both franchises. But if I'm looking at this as an individual film, and I love Batman Begins, Creed to me is is such a phenomenal movie. And I think, Johnny, maybe if you go back and rewatch it, this fight gets a little closer for you. I don't know if it passes Batman Begins, but
Oh, there he is.
yeah, like you know how much Tristan's here, and now he's not. But Johnny, you know much how I love Batman Begins and this Nolan trilogy. But as an individual movie, I think Creed passes it, even if it's just by a little bit. I think just the performances, the energy that it has in the directing, in the fight scenes alone, the what they were able to do with an older franchise like Rocky and bring in someone, and you kind of feel like you're watching it for the first time, even though they tell similar beats to the very first one. They tell it in a really interesting way. They give you a really good look at Philadelphia, which is also very important for the Rocky franchise. The music, the way they use it, the old score and new, bringing it back is great. They're both great movies, but to me, Creed is just a better made film.
All right. So if you have a battle on our
to
hands,
a standstill.
I'm not changing my opinion. There's no chance in that.
Yeah, Batman Begins is one of Joe's top movies of all time, and
I love Creed, but it ain't Batman Begins.
Hill to jump over. Yeah, I just think, Creed is great, but I don't know. At the end of the day, it's still a sports movie, and I feel like sports movies have just such a lower ceiling as films in general than a lot of other genres. And I love sports, but Creed is great and it hypes you up and stuff, but it doesn't have anything to really make you think. It has Stallone's performance, and all the performances are good, but also it has moments that fall flat for me are the I know it's a big thing in the area, but the moment that's supposed to get you hyped up, like the original Rocky running up the steps, is him running down the street with all the dudes doing tricks on their motorcycles. And that scene falls so flat for me that is what hinders, even just going back to it. I'm like, man, if only they nailed the get him hyped up for the fight scene, and they really kind of failed at that for me. It's just so overlong, and nothing in that is visually cool to me, at least. I know that scene worked for some people, but I don't know. Batman Begins, from start to finish, I think is an incredible movie. I think every moment in that movie works for me. I like the plot has some holes with the water stuff, but I like that in a big blockbuster movie. I like being able to point to kind of a goofy villain plot in some ways, but the dealing with your fear, Joe said it, Batman Begins is the best Batman movie to ever come out. And to me, I just think Batman is just a more interesting character than Rocky or Creed or anyone in that franchise. As much as I love the franchise, it's that one's going to be a tough one for me to sway on, and I know Joe's not swaying on it.
And I will say this as far as another defensive Batman Begins, Creed is the story. I've brought it up, but Creed is essentially the story of the Rocky story with just slight twists throughout it. Where Batman Begins is a full on completely different story. There is no Batman movie that's anywhere similar to this story. It's completely whole original thing. The tone is completely different. It's a complete reimagining of everything we've seen before in a Batman movie, where Creed is kind of just the same but modernized.
Yeah.
When I think of my all-time favorite movie sequences, I'll always think of the final fight in Creed. I'll always think of being in that theater and being so engaged with the final fight that it was as if you were watching an actual fight in an actual stadium, in an actual arena. People were cheering, people were clapping, and I know you guys are big sports fans, but I'm not really. I appreciate the athleticism of the physical body or whatever, but I've never really been the person who sits there and watches sports or analyzes any level of sports. I don't think I've watched a single UFC fight or in my whole entire any kind of boxing fight in my life outside of Creed and Rocky. But for me, this worked even beyond just being a sports movie, and I think it worked in terms of like this man trying to live up to the legacy of his father and someone that he never even really knew, and I think that there's an element of that in this movie that I think sometimes is overlooked. Like Johnny just called it like, oh, it's just another sports movie, but I think there's a lot in it as well about Adonis trying to kind of figure out himself and within his own legacy of who he is and trying to find his own path among that. So I think Creed definitely, I just love that movie, and it's similar to Joe. It's like I don't know how to budge against a movie that's like one of my all-time favorite movies against a movie that I do really definitely like a lot, but like to me just is not on the level of this one.
I'll say
Yeah.
this: we're talking about revitalizing franchises, and yeah, if you look at it as a whole, as movies, we're split. But look at the movie that came directly after both of these and where they are now. The Dark Knight is, I know if this was The Dark Knight versus Creed, we'd be singing different tunes. It'd probably be a clean sweep here.
Yep.
And Creed 2 was fine. Like it had some moments, but it was
solid,
just
it
it
was
was nothing
adequate, but it was
more than
not-
fine.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
like the next Creed movie I'm going to see, but I'm not going to go into it with any hype. And the next Batman movie, I know it's a different, like kind of a different franchise now, but the whole reason we're getting the Matt Reeves Batman is because of Batman Begins. So I think the tiebreaker for this should come down to what revitalized the franchise better. And I think that is Batman Begins over Creed for sure.
And
I
what I
agree
was
with
gonna
that.
say, yeah, what I was gonna say before even you said that is that Tristan, like you said, you wouldn't probably be able to budge. It's one of your favorites. Joe, it's one of your favorites, and you're not gonna budge. And then Johnny is a lot further apart on his than it is for me. I would say
Yeah.
Batman Begins and Creed are a lot closer. So if that's gonna be the tiebreaker, I would say between the four of us, Batman Begins probably has more, points with that. Because I do love the movie. It is one of my favorite franchises, so I'm good with that.
All right.
Yeah, and I do want to fall back on that. When I had that in my own head, when I came down to this movie or that movie, I did go to, okay, which one better revitalized or better rebooted or better captured the franchise as a whole? And I do think, like, without Batman Begins, we don't get any of this new era of superhero stuff. And I love my Snyderverse and that kind of stuff, and I don't think we get any of that without this movie. I love my Logan, and I don't think we ever get Logan. I don't think we get Joker. I don't think we get any of that without this movie coming out. So yeah, in terms of impact, it's hard to argue against that in that way.
All right. And so that leads us to our first movie that's going to make the championship. We have Toy Story 3 versus Casino Royale. Two very different movies. And with that,
Yeah.
I will go to Johnny first.
I'll say this: my top four movies of my list are not in this order, but Toy Story 3, Mad Max Fury Road, Batman Begins, and Casino Royale. So it's all come down to there's not like a big difference of where these really lie. So I think the fights are going to be close. I think it's tough because Casino Royale is definitely like a better movie for me and of a franchise that I care more about just as like a fan of, but Toy Story 3 has a lot more nostalgia for me. Toy Story was the first movie I was ever taken to in theaters, and then Toy Story 3 came out at that perfect time, right when I was like, choosing what college I was going to, and all that stuff that this movie deals with hit me right at the perfect time. So it's really tough. If I go based on like my tiebreaker for the last one, which one did its job better as far as like revitalizing? Casino Royale did the perfect job of rebooting, but yeah, it was followed by the writer's strike and Quantum, and people were mixed on that. Toy Story 3 should have just been the end. Toy Story 4 might hurt that did it, but Toy Story 3 was supposed to come out when it did and be the finale, and I think it did that job maybe better than like Casino Royale as far as rebooting. So while Casino Royale is my higher choice, I think just talking about remakes and reboots and stuff and talking about these movies, I think for me it's going to be Toy Story 3 here. Shockingly, I didn't think that when I started talking, but I kind of talked myself into it.
All right, and with that, I'll go to the other big Bond fan to see if he feels similarly or if he's going to stick with his friend Daniel Craig.
Well, with that decision, I think we all kind of know probably where this is going based on kind of your thoughts on Casino Royale, but it's really close. Obviously, I said Casino Royale is my number one, but like Johnny said, as we've been talking through in the context of the bracket, Toy Story 3 has a lot of points that kind of make it a lot closer than it would be if it's just looking at just my own rankings. I think I still have to go with Casino Royale just because of how much I love that movie and the connection I have to it. But Toy Story 3 is, like Johnny said, very nostalgic. It's a masterpiece of Pixar, I think, and it would be right behind it. So just because I think I know where your 2 votes are going, I'll just stick with Casino Royale so it at least has 1 vote here.
All right. I will go.
Yeah, I would have liked to have been the tiebreaker on that one if it came to it, but I don't know where Joe's going with it. I have a feeling on Tristan, but I don't know about Joe.
Yeah, Tristan, where's your vote going?
I do really like Casino Royale. I don't want to say it's a terrible movie. I think it's a really strong revitalization of the franchise, and especially now that we've gotten No Time to Die, I think this movie's moved up in my mind because in the end we did get a good conclusion, even though I do think Quantum was a bit of a mess. I can overlook a couple misses if in the end it does wrap up well in a franchise. So I think for me, Casino Royale moved up the ranking for me as this new one came out. So maybe if I do a rewatch through the entire like Craig run, I might even like Casino Royale even more than I already do. But I think Toy Story 3 accomplished so much in terms of revitalizing the franchise and hitting the emotional beats. And we've seen Pixar try to revise their franchises before. Like we have Cars sequels, and we have a couple other Pixar. Finding Dory was another one where Pixar tried to be like, oh, we had a really iconic movie a few years ago. Let's like bring the characters back again. And that movie just kind of flopped like a fish, And I think we never really got anything in terms of Pixar sequels that was even close to this. So I'm going to go ahead and give the win to Toy Story 3, although it is closer than I maybe made it out before my other arguments. But Casino Royale, you had a good run, but Toy Story 3 just hits the emotions a lot harder.
All right. When I submitted my list, Casino Royale was number 5 and Toy Story 3 was number 7. However, I agree with Johnny. As we were talking about these things and as we were, talking about reboots, and I think even as I'm just sitting here thinking about Toy Story 3 more, just all of the emotions I felt during that movie, it came out right at the perfect time. I graduated the same year as Johnny did, so it came out the summer before my senior year of high school. It was just the right movie at the right time, and it's just hard to recapture that feeling, and every time I see it, I get that same feeling, so my vote would be for Toy Story 3 as well. And I will say, as the host, it's difficult, because I was thinking Johnny and Bobby vote for Casino Royale. Tristan, I was 50-50 on, but I figured he was leaning Toy Story 3, and I figured I was leaning Toy Story 3, so I thought we had another battle on our hands. But
yeah, I think at the end of the day, what it came down to is when you look at it, Toy Story 3 I think it had a little more of an uphill battle. Casino Royale is the better movie, but I think it still only came out 4 years after Die Another Day. It wasn't even as big of a gap between Batman and Robins and Batman Begins. So while the franchise was in the shitter after Die Another Day, it was still decently relevant. A movie had just come out in theaters 4 years before. And that's basically been the gap in between all the Craig movies after that anyway. So I just think with Toy Story 3, it was just such an epic conclusion, and they had kind of higher odds against them knocking out of the park, and they did. And fuck that one guy who gave it a negative review. It should be the only franchise with all 100%.
Ahmad White or whatever.
Yeah, that dude. Look him up. He is the worst reviewer, and should be discredited.
Yeah. All right, and so with that, we have our matchup to see who's going to take on Toy Story 3 in the finals, and that is Mad Max Fury Road versus Batman Begins. And we've said, I think I've said everything I could say on both of these movies. I've talked about how Batman Begins is in my top 4 all time. Have not said the same for Mad Max Fury Road. Everyone that's watching or listening or just on this podcast knows where my vote's going. I'm not even going to vocalize it. Tristan, where's your vote going?
It's really actually very difficult here because I think both of these are phenomenal accomplishments in what they're trying to do. And Fury Road does feel like it kind of feels like a missed potential in a way, because you can tell they were setting up a lot of characters to come back for sequels, and we might get that Furiosa movie, but it seems like it's going to be a shell of what it was like originally intended to be. And I think in a way I'm going to give a squeezing win here to Batman Begins, just because it did actually revitalize Batman, and we got the Dark Knight out of this. And Dark Knight Rises sure gets like some hits against it once in a while, but I think it's still one of the better Batman movies. And we get one of my favorite movies of all time with Batman v Superman because of this, and we get a lot of really ambitious attempts at making superhero movies interesting because of this. So I'm gonna, even though I've spent the whole episode kind of trying to fight against Batman Begins, in the end here, I'm gonna go ahead and put it into my final two and give the win to Batman Begins for my vote.
All right, Tristan Mayer, who says Batman Begins is not a good standalone movie, but Batman v Superman is one of his all-time favorites. All right then, Bobby, we'll go to you next.
Yeah. Even though I argued against Batman Begins last time, and then it ended up conceding. And I said that Mad Max Fury Road was a lot higher on my list. Just though, as we keep talking about revitalizing franchises, it became a lot closer. Especially Johnny, you're talking about more Toy Story 3 and what kind of that did, as well. Even though that one was a conclusion to it, Mad Max, like Tristan said, is a lot of missed potential where they set up a lot of stuff. It, because of behind the scenes production issues, is maybe not going to happen, or at least not how it was intended. So maybe in the context of the bracket, because it Batman Begins went on to start one of my favorite trilogies and one of like the best trilogy in one of my favorite franchises. I think I might be leaning Batman Begins here, even though it was a lot lower on my list initially.
All right, Johnny, your vote doesn't matter, but what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'll say.
Well,
I think Mad Max is awesome, and I have so much fun with it. But like Tristan said, like this is about reboots, and Mad Max Fury Road was a revival of the franchise, but it didn't end up rebooting things as it should have. We should have gotten at least one, if not two, of these movies by now, and just outside things and just production limits, we haven't been able to see what came next. Batman Begins, we kind of got that full story, and we're still highly anticipating new Batman films. So as far as like putting a franchise back on the map, Batman Begins did it better than anything.
All right, and so with that, we have our championship matchup: Toy Story 3 versus Batman Begins. I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of stats based on how we seeded these in our horror movie matchup, based on the rankings of how we rank them. This is let me pull this up real quick. This is our 4 seed versus our 6 seed. Batman Begins was our 4, and Toy Story 3 was our 6. So I kind of like this format. I mean, part of it, I think, is us, as we're going through, recontextualizing what constitutes a winner. But I think this format allows for more upsets rather than going by our own seeding. So I will go to Tristan because I have no idea how you're going to vote.
Unfortunately, neither do I, so I might have to talk my way through this argument in my head.
Today, so.
I've had to do
I had no
too,
idea
yeah.
I was going to go with Casino Royale over The Force Awakens until about 3 seconds into talking. So.
Yeah, same with Toy Story 3 for me. I think that, like, the funny thing is I used that argument to win over Batman Begins over Creed, and that's what kind of made me choose Toy Story 3 over Casino Royale. So I don't know.
All right.
This is difficult because you do want to look at the title and say remake, reboot, revival. Obviously, if you look at it that way, Batman Begins revived the franchise way better than Toy Story did. Like, we got one Toy Story sequel in it after this one, and it was all right. But at the same time, Toy Story 3's goal wasn't to like revive the franchise, bring it back to life necessarily. It was to give it a proper conclusion, and I think that's something that is valuable in the Hollywood world today, where things seem to want to go on forever and ever and ever, and to have a movie come out that ends the arcs, gives you that emotional finality of saying goodbye to these characters, is really a great, important thing to have. And then they, of course, came and they made another one, and I think if there was no Toy Story 4, I would be way more split on this, but it's hard to call Toy Story 3 the finale of the franchise when there's a Toy Story 4 after it. And then when I comparatively look at Batman Begins, you can say there's ups and downs of course there are ups and downs to the Batman franchise after this, and people didn't like the Zack Snyder take, and then that kind of is in limbo now, and now we have this new take coming up once again. And I think Batman's one of those fascinating characters that I think can be given to all kinds of different directors and been done in all kinds of different ways. So I think that it also gives the win here to Batman Begins. I think it just kind of embodies the potential of a reboot, and you can take the idea of a character and take all these scattered things from his comic book origins. Okay, the League of Shadows are this, and we have this from that, and we have this from that, and we're going to put it all on the tone of like Batman Year One, and we're going to make it out into this indie art house director is going to make it. And like, that sounds like a crazy combination of things that would never have happened in 2021 era Hollywood, but it happened in this era. And I think I'll always look back on it as a really great moment. And one of the final times that a comic book movie was very much like, okay, give it to the director, let them do whatever they want type of movie. So I like this as a revival of the comic book genre, but also as like this big turning point where it became a huge corporate thing.
Yeah, I will say, I was shocking myself even as Tristan started talking. I'm like, where is my vote going to go? Am I going to go for the movie that I've loved for the longest time? Or am I going to go with a movie that maybe has the more, as we were talking about how much Toy Story 3 actually affected me. But I agree with Tristan. I think if Toy Story 4 doesn't come out, my vote may have went to Toy Story 3, but it's hard to call Toy Story 3 like this great finale to this franchise. And I thought to myself walking out of Toy Story 4 that they should have called this movie Woody, because it's so completely just different and completely different themes and almost like the opposite message of the previous Toy Story movies, where all the previous Toy Story movies were like, oh, we gotta, it's all about the kid, you all gotta go back to like the kid, everything is about helping Andy. And then Toy Story 4 is like, screw the kid, focus on yourself, which I get the message in that movie, but with how much that movie was focused on Woody and not all of the toys, I think the movie would have been better received if they had not called it Toy Story 4 and called it Woody. And I think it would have just made the Toy Story trilogy stand on its own better. And I agree with Tristan. They don't make Toy Story 4 or just don't have it part of that, saga of films. I think I may go Toy Story 3, but I can't really call it this great end of a franchise when it isn't. So my vote goes to the great beginning of another franchise in Batman Begins. And with that, I will go to Johnny, who either makes this interesting, who voted for Toy Story 3 over one of his favorite movies of all time, or declares Batman Begins the winner.
It is tough, like you guys said, but I echo. Basically, in my head was everything that Joe and Tristan both mentioned, but Joe specifically saying like, if Toy Story 4 didn't come out, this would be Toy Story 3 probably. But if I'm looking at my tiebreaker, because these are just two of my favorite films that have ever been made, my tiebreaker is like, what did its job better as like what we are ranking? Batman Begins rebooted Batman and put him back on the map. Toy Story 3 set out to be the conclusion, was the perfect conclusion, and then they just made Toy Story 4 and kind of hindered that. So, I think just if that's the tiebreaker we're going on, and I think that's the best way to decide this for this bracket, it's got to be Batman Begins for what it did for not only what it represented for Batman as a franchise, but for superhero movies. And like Tristan mentioned, all the stuff like the real serious down to earth ones that actually stand out to me over a lot of the other ones. Batman Begins is that for me. So I'm going to go with that as well. And I don't know what Bobby would have done, but a possible clean sweep in the finale after a lot of buildup. But I think we are going with the right pick after kind of deciphering a lot of, what won over what. I think Batman Begins kind of encapsulates all of that.
Yeah, Bobby, would it have been a clean sweep, or would you have, voted for Toy Story 3, which I think would have been a worthy winner if we went that way?
It would have been, but I think it just came down to, as we were doing the bracket and we defined kind of how we were ranking these and how we were moving them along and what beat what, on what standards. I think Batman Begins did what it set out to do. Like you guys said, it rebooted the franchise and started a new franchise, and revitalized Batman as a character in pop culture, and moving forward. That's why we're getting more movies. And Toy Story 3 set out to be the conclusion, and it would have been a lot stronger of a contender if Toy Story 4 didn't come out, like you said. So even though it was lower on my list, I loved the movie, and the more we talked about it, I think it just fits more criteria of our bracket of a reboot, of a franchise. So I would have given it the clean sweep as well.
All right. And I want to make a quick proposal. I want your guys' thoughts. A great film in Casino Royale won the James Bond bracket, made the final four of the reboot, remake, and revival bracket. Can we make it eligible as the first entrance into the movie Changeup Bracket Hall of Fame, where if we ever do another bracket that it's eligible for, it's just automatically ineligible? We've said everything we're ever going to need to say about Casino Royale. I feel like
I say we retire it until we do.
Yeah.
We retire it unless we do a list of like the movie Changeup all-time favorite movies, and
Yeah.
if
Okay,
whatever
I would
can
say
fall
that.
into that.
There you go.
Yeah, but like
Yeah,
if
I like
we
that.
do like top movies of the 2000s to bracket of the top movies of the 2000s to 2010s, then it's just like what else are we
Excluding
gonna say?
Casino Royale.
Yeah, Casino Royale. It's
Yeah.
one bracket and made Final Four in another. We've talked about it. If you want to hear our thoughts on it,
Yeah.
there you go.
It's
And the
out
funny
there.
thing is, if I was closer on Creed than Batman Begins, and I had voted for that, and we hadn't even really discussed what did the job better, the Casino Royale might have been in the finals against either Creed or Mad Max Fury Road, because that probably would have got my vote if we hadn't really just had that discussion. So I think Batman Begins going through and that being the tiebreaker is what ended up winning it. But if it came down to Batman Begins versus Casino Royale or Creed versus Casino Royale, we might be looking at a different champion, and then it would have possibly won two brackets. So it kind of lost on a buzzer beater at the end there in the final four.
All right. Anyone else have any final thoughts about this bracket?
It was an interesting conversation, especially as we got into the debate of like what is a reboot and what isn't. And I'm especially surprised because like when I looked at my list just now, I'm like, oh, like I'm not a lot of mine made it far, but that was mostly because like as we got more into the discussion of which did the job better, a lot of these that I hadn't necessarily thought of went on big runs. You know, I didn't necessarily consider Toy Story 3 when I was thinking of reboots, revivals, and then as we were talking about it, it really kind of started to click for me. And as we started talking about Batman Begins, it really started to click on just how much that really did do to revive the entire franchise and genre. So a great conversation, and I got to watch Ocean's 11 for the first time because of this, and I was really impressed by that one. So a fun win there.
I will say my number one won, so I'm happy with that. Two great films, you know.
Yeah.
All right, Bobby.
My final four all made it, so that works for me.
Yeah. Bobby, any final
No,
thoughts?
I mean, it's always fun to do these because you rank them on your own, and like looking at my list, a lot of mine made it pretty far, and at least our final four, everything was at least on there. But I wouldn't have expected to put Batman Begins even into the final four based on my list. But it's always fun to come up with the criteria as we go, basically, and kind of talk through it. So it's always a lot of fun. I like these brackets.
All right. Check out this weekend. Tristan and I will be doing another episode of our Disney Plus Weekly Review. Seems because of Disney Plus Day last week that it's going to be a slow day. I think we're going to be reviewing Doogie Kamealoha MD. And then because it's Thanksgiving next weekend and Hawkeye is premiering, we are both going to be pitching MCU Thanksgiving movies. So that will be fun, something for us to do. And otherwise, our episode's going to be about 10 minutes long. And we will also be giving Thanksgiving episode recommendations because there are no Thanksgiving movies at all. That's partially why we're pitching MCU Thanksgiving movies. I already have what I'm going to do locked down, no idea what Tristan's doing. And if you're watching the live stream, I believe Tristan, Bobby, and I are going to be doing a Spider-Man No Way Home trailer reaction, which that trailer dropped about an hour and a half ago. And if
Speaking
you're
of reboots and revivals and franchises that never seem to stop,
the whole reason we were doing this is Ghostbusters Afterlife comes out this weekend. That's why we were doing a reboot, revival, whatever thing. And then if you're watching this on YouTube or the podcast version, then that trailer reaction should be out already. And all right, that's all I have to say. Without further ado, goodbye.
Thank you for watching the Movie Changeup podcast. We'd really appreciate if you liked, commented, subscribed, and shared us with anyone you think might be into what we're doing over here. Thank you. Have a nice day.